Hey guys, welcome to Green Bean Fiction. So in today's video we are gonna see, what if Deku joined Class 1B and fell for Setsuna? Part 2. Before starting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you are interested in MHA fanfictions. This story is Deku in Class 1B by Demon Heart 12. Now without wasting any more time, let's dive in. What in fuck's sake is happening here? Was the one phrase that was going through the mind of every member of Class 1B. Earlier, the students of Class 1A were on their way to the USJ now, to begin their rescue training. Everyone was excited except Bakugo, who said something among the lines of rescue training is best left for extras who can't fight villains, not the future #1 hero, but he was mostly tuned out. Then as they were about to reach the place, the frog girl of Class 1A, known as Suyu Osui, asked Bakugo, "Bakugo, can I ask you something?" Bakugo looked at her with an ever-permanent scowl on his face, as he said, "What the fuck do you want from me, frog face?" The girl didn't like how she was addressed, but she allowed it to slide since he was rude to everyone. "I was wondering if there was a reason why you attacked that green-haired boy a couple of days back. I mean, he seemed nice all things considered from what I observed." This somewhere caused a green-haired boy to sneeze. The boy then looked at her with a huge sneer on his face as he shouted, "Because he's a fucking Deku. He's quirkless. He's trash of society. I was only reminding him that he have no place standing on the same pedestal with me." The boy then took deep breaths as he tried to control his anger. It became even worse every time that worthless Deku was mentioned. Before Osui can say anything, Yaoyorozu said, "Please Bakugo, refrain from stressing our relationships with our sister class even further than they already are. If you don't like Midoriya that much, don't interact with him." Bakugo felt like foaming at the mouth as he said, "First off, Ponytail, you don't get to tell me what to do or not. Second off, if I don't beat up that quirkless Deku, then how is he going to learn his place, and understand that he's nothing but a pebble in my way? And finally, I don't care if some shitty extras from the second class hate us, they're there because they can't reach our status." My, our dear Pomeranian is talking correctly, Yaoyorozu. We're the superior Class 1A. We must do our best to show those despicable 1B students who are there. Monoma didn't get to finish his banter as a dart hit his neck. Everyone then looked at their class representative who was holding a blow dart. Yaoyorozu then lowered it saying, "We will do nothing of this sort." She then looked at the entire class and said, "Got it?" "Yes, ma'am," was the common reply. Kirishima then looked at Bakugo saying, "Dude, you keep saying that the green dude is quirkless, but didn't you see what he did today in the cafeteria? I mean, having lighting around your body isn't something quirkless people usually do." He then looked at himself and said, "Man, I wish I had a flashy quirk like that since my quirk isn't that flashy." This caused Bakugo to yell, "Shut up, shitty hair, there's no way Deku can have a quirk. He must have been doing a trick. And even if he did have one, I'll beat the shit out of him till he tells me where he got the quirk, because people get their quirks when they're 4 or at 6 max." He was fuming at the thought that Deku was hiding this quirk all the time. The mere idea that Deku had a quirk all those years, and allowed him to beat him, angered him, but he knew why Deku did this. He was looking down on him, laughing at him, and thinking he was better than him, but he'll get to the bottom of this. Yaoyorozu then said, "I didn't know you're a quirk scientist, Bakugo?" The boy looked at her in confusion as she said, "You aren't one." I see, so don't start throwing words left and right. Whether he got his quirk now at 4 or 6 or even now, it's not our business." Bakugo fumed in anger as he understood that the girl was making fun of him. This little act caused a boy to shiver. She then looked at Kirishima and said, "I also believe you'll be a wonderful hero, Kirishima. You don't need a flashy quirk for that." The boy blushed as he said, "Thanks, Yaoyorozu, but if we're talking about quirks, then I'm sure that Bakugo and Todoroki take the cake for flashy and powerful." He said as Bakugo was still fuming, and the other mentioned male remained quiet. He was a moderately tall male. His eyes were multicolored, with the left being blue, and the right being gray. He also had multicolored hair, with the right being white, and the left being red. But his most striking feature was a huge burn mark on the left side of his face. But Bakugo won't be popular given that he can't go 5 minutes without shouting or cursing. Suyu said, pointing out the blonde-haired boy's violent behavior causing him to yell at her, "What did you say, frog girl? Do you want to die?" This only proved her opinion as she pointed at him saying, "See? Kaminari, the boy who tried to flirt with Itsuka earlier, then said, "Dude, like we only knew each other for a couple of days, but at this point, we all know that your personality is a combination of dog shit and sewage being burned." Meanwhile, the only person who wasn't invested in this conservation was Iida, who was still shocked after the altercation in the cafeteria. He remembered Kendo's words when she told him he was the reason for the whole misunderstanding. He also remembered his own hateful words toward Midoriya. "Stop this muttering at once or leave if you can't take this seriously." Are trying to distract her, such shameful behavior from a future hero. "I truly recommend you change schools since you don't have the spirit of Ua. You ruffians, how dare you attack one of our classmates? Midoriya, you were the one who saw the true nature of the test, how can I forget this? You proved that you were the superior person, yet I still looked down on you." Iida then clenched his fist as he said mentally, "But no matter, I will apologize and make things right." He then looked at Bakugo, who was screaming at Denki but stopped when Aizawa said, "Enough, we're here. Get off the bus, and follow me to the training grounds." Everyone then walked out of the bus as they all made it inside the training facility, as a figure wearing a spacesuit approached. This caused Uraraka to go fangirl mode as she said, "You're 13, the rescue hero. You use your quirk black hole to help people and rescue them. Shut the hell up and let the fishbowl begin talking." Bakugo yelled at the girl, causing her to pout and ran hiding behind 13 like a beaten puppy while the hero patted her head saying, "It's all right. I love talking to my fans, but how about we wait until after we finish training?" The girl nodded her head with a smile as she returned to her class. 13 then welcomed them to the USJ, and they entered it seeing multiple disaster zones. The space hero then began explaining that although her quirk can be used to save people, it could be also used to hurt people. She then cited that with Aizawa they trained their bodies while with All Might, they saw how their powers work in a fighting environment, and today they will learn how to use their quirks to save people. While the students were talking among themselves about what will they do today, Eraser walked to 13 saying, "Where's All Might?" The space hero then raised 3 fingers as she said, "He kinda overdid it in his heroic work today." What she was saying was true, since Nezu had already phoned her from the school telling her that the hero was resting from overdoing it. This caused Eraser to say, "This man is the height of irrationality." He then walked up to the students and said, "All right, here's what we're going." He was cut off by Kirishima saying, "Wow, you have fake villains too." Eraser turned his head as he looked down to the plaza, and see a black mist appearing with villains pouring out of it. He then saw a man covered with hands standing in the middle, beside him was a behemoth of a monster with bulging muscles, an exposed brain, and a bird beak. The man covered in hands then said, "Where's All Might? The schedule said that he was going to be here today." It's then that both teachers realized that the press thing was probably a trick to draw their attention, while he took the schedule. The hand-covered man then said, "I'm Tamura Shigaraki, and we're here to kill the symbol of peace." This shocked everyone. Eraser then asked both 13 and Kaminari to contact the school, however, they couldn't, which caused Todoroki to conclude that this was planned and that they have someone who was blocking the signal to the school. Eraser then lowered his goggles as he said, 13, protect the students. He then jumped into the fray as he extended his scarf. One of the thugs tried to shoot him with his quirk, but couldn't, so he began panicking, "What's happening?" One of the thugs then yelled, "That's Pro Hero Eraserhead. He can erase any quirk that isn't a mutation type." The hero then landed down as he began to beat down the thugs, but one of them with 4 arms then yelled, "Well, I'm a mutant, so you can't erase my quirk." The thug was shocked when Eraser's scarf was tied around his neck and pulled him toward the hero, who elbowed him in the face as he said, "I know, but most of you tend to fight in close combat, so I have safety measures." The hero then blinked to reset his quirk, but the villain who was responsible for teleportation escaped toward the students. He cursed under his breath as he punched another villain. Kurogiri then appeared in front of the students as he said, "Hello there, future heroes, please excuse our interruption, but we are the League of Villains, and we're here to destroy the symbol of peace." He then looked through yellow eyes at the students and said, "How about we kill some of the golden eggs before he arrives?" 13 raised her hand to try and defeat the villain, but 2 of her students jumped at the villain. Bakugo readied an explosion while Kirishima sharpened his arm, both trying to hit him, but they both passed through him, causing him to sigh as both missed his weak point. That was close. Kurogiri then said, "You didn't think this would be able to take me down. He then felt someone tapping his suit, and his eyes widened when a blonde student stood beside him and retreated quickly as he said, "You honestly thought you can come here and brag about killing the symbol of peace?" The thing that unnerved is that the boy was now covered by a swirling black mist. The boy then said, "Now witness how I call the cavalry." However, against Monoma's best wishes, he couldn't control the portal he copied with his quirk, or at least where he opened it. The mist man then laughed as he said, "Young man, my quirk is more than teleportation." He then narrowed his eyes as he said, "You need to know the place and its layout." He said as Monoma finally managed to open a portal, "So the real question now is, where did you open the portal?" This was followed by a bunch of screams echoing through the portal, and bodies went through it falling onto the entrance near Class 1A. They immediately knew who they were. It was their rival Class 1B. Kurogiri then chuckled as he looked at Monoma saying, "Thank you, young man, for giving us this gift." Monoma then looked around and saw a familiar orange-haired girl sitting on a green-haired boy. When she looked at him he said, "Whoops, my bad." She then facepalmed. One of the boys then yelled at them demanding some kind of explanation on what was happening here, and why are they there. "Allow me to explain," Kurogiri said as he looked at Kamakiri, who began growling at him. "We're the League of Villains, and we came here to kill All Might, and your classmate here in an attempt to bring the teachers brought you over." The Living Mist said as every 1B student looked at the blonde boy as if he is an idiot. Izuku then began to assess his situation. He was in the USJ. Villains were attacking them, they were teleported there, and finally, Itsuka was sitting on his lap. "Wait," Izuku said in his head as he looked at Kendo, who was sitting on his lap, causing him to go red. So he said, "Kendo, can you please get off me? It's a bit awkward." The girl then looked at the boy and saw where she was sitting. She blushed quickly as she jumped away. The Living Mist then said, "Ah, young love, but sadly I'm going to interrupt you both," he said as he spread out his mist around them. "Now all of you will be scattered and killed." The mist now swallowed all students except a few from both classes. After that, the only remaining students in the plaza were Tenya Iida, Hontasiro, Mina Ishido, Sato Rikido from 1A, and Awase, Shishida, Pony, and Shota from 1B. The Living Mist then looked at them as he said, "Well then, it appears I'll have to end you." 13, who was still there, said, "Not if I have something to say about it." In the zone of the ruins, Izuku opened his eyes as he said, "This isn't funny." He looked around him only for a hand to yank him away. He looked and saw Kamakiri, who ushered him to be silent while pointing in a direction. The green-haired boy looked and saw a couple of villains. He looked at his classmate, who ushered him to move. In the landslide zone, Kendo sat up as she saw Yaoyorozu with another girl with purple hair and some earphone jacks from her ears and Kaminari. She then looked around her and saw Kodai, Kaibara, and Bondo all rubbing their heads from pain as she said, "And this happened when I was about to trick Izuku and win the spar." She looked around and saw villains, so she said, "Wonderful villains." In the fire zone, Abara, Manga, Kosei, Toru Hagakuri the Invisible Girl, Mezzo Shoji, and Yuga Ioma watched as Shoto Todoroki wreaked havoc against the villains, so they silently stayed out of his way so they can't be caught inside the mess. In the earthquake zone, Tetsu was with Kirishima and Bakugo as villains fell upon them. In the raindrop zone, Kanoko woke up to see Kuwaro looking at her and said, "Well, this is going to be a long afternoon. Let's group with the others," he said as he pointed his fingers toward Tokiyami and Koda. In the mountain zone, Ojiro from Class 1A with Rin from Class 1B, woke up with a killer headache, as he said, "Man, is that gonna hurt tomorrow morning?" Rin then replied groaning, "Tell me about it." They both heard movement from the distance and readied themselves in fighting poses. Rin smiled, "So, you're also a martial artist?" Ojiro replied, "Well, with my tail I had to even the score with the flashier powers." Rin then said, "Let's see who takes out more villains then." The tailed boy smiled as he said, "Deal on." They then both went and entered the fray. In the flood zone, Setsuna opened her eyes and saw that she was falling from the air, so she quickly activated her quirk and went to the ship inside it. She then scanned the air and saw a head of blonde hair bobbing in the water. She activated her quirk and grabbed him only to find it was the boy who brought them here in the first place. She then heard someone yell, "Hey, who are you?" She looked and it was some small boy from class 1A with balls for hair. She then said, "I'm from 1B, and I just saved this idiot who brought us here." She finished as she pointed toward Monoma, who grunted and said, "Let's leave the insults for later, 1B scum." He was then smacked on the head by Setsuna saying, "Don't start it." She then looked and saw a girl with green hair and frog-like features join them as she discarded her classmate, Rekio Yanagi, who cleared her throat from water. The girl then said, "My name is Suyu Asui, and we should probably find a way out of this." Setsuna groaned as she mentally said, "You don't need to tell me that twice." Back at the school, All Might stayed with Nezu in the teacher's room as he drank tea with the principal while the latter roasted him about not taking his teaching job seriously. You would think that the principal would be afraid to criticize a man like All Might given their difference in size, but right now the hero was nothing but a shell of himself, a skinny old man with barely any meat on his bones, which no one would take seriously at first sight or believe that he is the symbol of peace. The man sighed and said, "Listen, Nezu sir, I know what I did was wrong, but you can't blame me. People need saving. I will try from here on forward to prioritize the students." The rat looked at him and shook his head. "It's just not that, All Might. You have to take into consideration that your time is running out, and you also have a successor to teach." "I know, but young Midoriya has made wonderful progress on his own," the hero tried to say, but Nezu then said, "I'm not saying he didn't, but you originally took this job to look for a successor and teach him how to use one for all, so act according to it, or I'll be forced to bring in the heavy artillery." "You don't mean," the hero began to shiver as he thought about that person. "Oh yes, I mean him," Nezu said with a demonic grin that told the hero he meant it. All right, I'll focus more on helping the students, but it's just that." The hero then clenched his fist as he smacked the table, causing it to crack even in his skinny form. "Every time I look at young Midoriya, I feel ashamed. I was there with him, but I never noticed the signs that he was bullied. It just makes me so angry to think someone as good as them gets bullied for not having a quirk." Nezu sighed as he told the hero, "That's the sad reality of this world. The strong destroy the weak in an attempt to prove their superiority, and no one dares to call them out since they are at the top of the food chain, and whoever dares gets silenced one way or another." Nezu then smiled, "But if it helps you feel any better, the school has been closed, and I took over it. I think I'm planning to open a junior Hyuga in its place, and all the teachers are under investigation." The symbol of peace smiled a little as he said, "I truly pity those who fall under the radar, Nezu sir." The door of the room was then slammed open. As Vlad and Midnight entered it, "My students," they all suddenly disappeared from the training rounds. The blood hero said in a frantic voice. All Might then spit out his tea, and yelled back as he buffed up, "What? As he told you, we went to bring some training equipment for some of the students, and by the time we returned, no one was there. All students suddenly vanished from existence as if the earth swallowed all of them." Midnight explained, "Principal, we need to act quickly to find the missing students, and see where they went." The symbol of peace said, but then added, "Are there any cameras in the training grounds so we can see what happened?" Nezu sighed sadly as he said, "No, there aren't, since the training grounds are within the school's perimeter. We thought that the students would be safe. It seems we are wrong though. I look into installing them immediately after this." He then looked at Vlad and said, "Please contact Inu for me, we'll try to find them by their scent." The blood hero then walked out quickly, and after a while returned with the dog hero. After that, they all went to training ground Gamma where the students were training, but the dog hero couldn't find anything, so he said, "I can't find anything. It's like they suddenly disappeared." Nezu hummed as he looked at Vlad, and asked, "Are sure this isn't a prank by your students?" Vlad looked at him, and said, "Please be serious, sir." The rat then sighed and said, "Just trying to smooth the atmosphere, as you guys say." All Might in his skinny form then tried to contact Aizawa to see if he knew anything, but couldn't reach him, so he said, "That's odd. I can't reach Aizawa." Nezu then said, "He must be training his students. You know how he gets. Let's not worry about that." The blonde hero nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something bad is happening. He then went with the others to search for the missing students. Back at the USJ, Izuku was walking with Kamakiri. Both were jumping from one place to another to avoid the villains' detection. Kamakiri now sat with Izuku and looked at a couple of villains that passed them, so he said, "Come on, let's keep moving so we can reach the others." Izuku then stood up but saw a couple of villains walking by as they said, "Dude, I heard they caught a student, and she's wearing some kind of spacesuit. Let's go check it out." "Definitely," the other one replied. Izuku looked in their direction and stood up to follow, but Kamakiri grabbed him saying, "Where are you going? Did you lose it?" "No, but we can't just leave her alone," Izuku replied. "But we need to return to the others. And leave her here? I don't think so. A hero's job is to save others. How can I live with myself if I let whoever needs help right now alone? I'm going to help her." Izuku finished as he ran following the villains with Toguro saying, "Damn you stutter, you making it hard to disrespect you." He then stood up and followed the boy. With Ochako, the girl was running around from the moment she fell into the zone of the ruins. She managed to get a few hits against some villains, but right now her quirk's drawback was acting up, and she wasn't feeling so good. She ran from the villains taking a corner beside an abandoned building, and tried to take her breath only for a voice to say, "Found you, sweetheart." The girl shivered in disgust, as she turned to lean away from him, but she couldn't make it far as now she was cornered by another villain who appeared in front of her. She then activated her quirk and tried to float away only for her to land on open ground and villains began to surround her. She looked around. She was in a bad situation. She closed her eyes preparing for the worst, but then a sound echoed as someone yelled, "Smash!" She looked and saw her savior from the entrance exam had punched one of the villains out cold. He was currently standing beside her, and asked, "Are you hurt?" "No, but," he then turned and punched someone trying to sneak up on him. Izuku then grabbed him and threw him into another villain sending them into a wall and knocking them out cold. Another villain with stretchy fingers tried to grab only for the hero in training to yank him towards him and punch him in the face causing him to black out. Another villain tried to hit Izuku, but he jumped back and kicked him in the stomach before kneeing him in the face. Unseen for the boy, a villain with an invisibility quirk managed to sneak up on him. The villain then yelled, "End of the line, hero." Izuku was shocked, but suddenly the villain grunted as he was kicked to the side. Izuku looked at his savior, who said, 2 minutes. 2 minutes, I left you alone, and you almost died." The boy smiled and said, "Thanks, Kamakiri." The bug boy smiled saying, "Don't mention. It's my job." They then both looked and saw a couple of villains approaching them, and saw that Uraraka was still out of commission due to her quirk's drawback being in full swing, so they jumped at them, and began to punch and slash them left and right. Finally, only one person was standing. He was a villain with some kind of rocky appearance. Izuku tried to punch only for him to punch the boy away saying that his punch tickled him. Kamakiri then tried to slash it, but he railed back in pain as his blades were being dulled. The villain laughed at them as he said, "I would be afraid too if I fought someone with a quirk superior to mine. So how about you give up, and I promise to keep the beating to a minimum." Kamakiri scowled as he sneered right back at him, "Funny, I was about to say something." Izuku then upped the percentage of his quirk to 6% so he can get a hit with more effect. Both of them readied themselves to fight the villain only for him to scream in panic and begin to sink into the ground. Moments later, he was buried to his neck with mud, as Juzo then appeared saying, "Be careful next time, you don't know when the ground suddenly becomes quicksand." The boy then looked at them, and said, "Come on guys, let's blot before their reinforcements come." Izuku then went to Uraraka who was starting to get better, and asked her, "Are you feeling better now?" She nodded as she said, "We should seriously stop meeting like this." The boy then said, "Agreed." He then picked her up, and the four began moving out of the zone of the ruins. In the landslide zone, Kendo punched a villain with her big fist sending him into unconsciousness, as she looked around, and saw Yui sticking close to her with a makeshift sword that Yaoyorozu made for the girl. Kaibaro was doing his best to keep the villains at bay. Bondo was trapping villains with his quirk, and finally, the students from 1A was doing their best to fight the villains, some of them that is. Kendo then looked at Momo who hit a villain with a staff she was holding knocking him out instantly. She then said, "Wow Yaoyorozu, I didn't expect our ruined conservation would be continued here of all places." Itsuka finished as she kicked a villain with a roundhouse kick sending him sprawling to the ground. The black-haired girl then laughed, "Agreed. I preferred it more if we sat and drank some tea, Momo said as she smacked a crook in the stomach, causing him to bend over before hitting him on the back of the neck, causing him to pass out. I'm more of a coffee person, but I suppose tea could do, Itsuka said as she held the hands of a villain with some kind of iron nails before headbutting and kneeing him in the chest as she threw him to the side. The villains began growling as one of them said, "Come on, they're only 7 kids, get them already." The earphone girl who was known as Kurogiri then said, "That's nice and all, but can bonding time wait for another day because we're not in a picnic here?" she said as she avoided a villain kicking him in the face and throwing him back. Momo then said, "Well, I read that most people connect during life or death situations, so you don't know. No hard feelings, but you're a nerd, Momo," Jiro replied. Kaibara then said, "Focus, we need to hold them back as much as possible, no time for sucking face." "Real mature there, Kaibara," Kendo said as she avoided a punch by a villain, before uppercutting him and kicking another one into the ground. "He's not wrong though," Kodai said as she threw a pebble at a villain who scoffed before she enlarged it, smashing him under it. "All of you, focus," Bondo said as he glued 2 villains to the ground before ducking under someone's fist and moving out of the way, giving Sen a chance to hit the villain in the face with his quirk, sending him flying into the ground. All the time, while everyone was fighting with the villains, one student was running around in fear. This was none other than Denki Kaminari, who was now ducking under a villain's spear-like quirk, before running toward his class representative and saying, "Hey, Yaomomo, can you please make me something so I can fight the villains with?" This caused Jiro to scoff at him, and said, "Says the guy who is a walking lightning rod. Go, fry them with your quirk." The boy didn't like Jiro's words as he crossed his arm over his chest saying, "Are you out of your mind? Such a training partner you are. My quirk is strong, but I can't control its direction. If I let loose, I'll probably fry you all with me." This made every student in class 1B wonder who this boy ever made into class 1A, in the first place, if he had such a bad back draw which would render him useless on the battlefield. Kaminari then looked at the girls and boys, and said, "That's why guys, I'm currently counting on you to protect me from all the dangerous villains." This made students of 1B sweat dropped as they seriously wondered how he made it into the hero course in the first place. Jiro, having enough of Kaminari's cowardly behavior, then said, "Well, aren't you a damsel in distress?" She then saw a villain coming close to them, and then she kicked the boy in his direction, as she said, "Go, and become our taser gun." The boy screamed in fear as he smashed into the man, causing the man to become electrocuted, and the boy smiled and said, "Well, look at this. I do work as a taser gun." He then looked at his friends and said, "Don't worry guys, I'll take them all down now." A villain then came up to the boy to try and stop them, but this only led to the man to become electrocuted with the other guy. Kendo then sighed as she said, "This can't go on forever, you know, right?" "Agreed," Momo said as she then produced a net-like material before saying, "But that's the best deal we have right now, so we'll have to work with it." She then looked at Kendo, and said, "Help me with this." Kendo looked at it and smiled. She understood what Yaoyorozu wanted to do. She wanted to capture as many villains as possible and threw them at Kaminari. She then held the net and Sen and Bondo saw it. She nodded for them, and they understood what to do. The glue giant then began throwing glue everywhere, causing the villains to begin to back away, while Sen was punching and rotating his arms, making villains fly back toward Kendo and Momo. Meanwhile, Kodai grabbed the net and pressed it, causing it to increase its size at Kendo's request. Now, with the villains cornered, Kyoka did her part of the plan as she inserted her jacks into her boots, and released an amplified version of her heartbeat from the speakers on her boots, causing the villains to shriek in pain as they felt their ears explode from pain. And finally, Kendo threw the net over them, and tied it around the villains before she threw it to Kaminari, to which it landed near him. Enough for him to touch it, and began electrocuting the villains, causing them to pass out from the pain. When he was finished, he walked over to his friends and said, "Nailed it." Kendo rubbed her head, as she made a mental note to tell Izuku about the boy later on, so he can help him control his quirk. Yui then coughed as she drew everyone's attention. When they looked at her, she said, "I don't think we're done here." They all looked and saw a couple of villains making their way toward them, which made Kaminari huff in anger as he said, "Man, I wish I can go all out so I can beat them in one go. Momo then said, everyone come close to me. She then looked at Kaminari as she said, get ready to go all out. The boy nodded in confusion but was shocked as the back of Momo's costume began to enlarge and a large sheet ripped through it as it covered all students, but him. Momo from under it said, Kaminari, this is an insulator, so you can go all out. The boy smiled as he said, and with that, I don't have to worry about hurting anyone anymore. The boy then lifted his arms and began to release electricity as he yelled, 3,000,000-volt attack. And with that, all villains got fried while the hero students were safely hidden under the large sheet. Once the sounds of electricity stopped, Momo lifted the sheet and saw that every villain was on the ground. Jiro looked too, but something caught her attention with Kendo, and that was that Momo was naked on her upper torso. Jiro then quickly yelled at Kaminari not to look, even though he was short-circuited since he activated his quirk's backdraw. She also sent her earphone jacks to both Bondo and Sen and began vibrating, causing both boys to scream in pain, as Bondo said, but we aren't even looking. Kendo then said with a blush, Yaoyorozu, shouldn't you do something about this? Momo laughed softly as she said, I can always create a new one. Itsuka deadpanned at her as she said, once we're out of here, I'll tell Setsuna to talk to you about DNA-infused costumes. This intrigued the rich girl, but what none of them noticed was a hand that erupted from the earth, or Denki walking close to it in his brainless mood. Back in the fire zone, Shoto was interrogating the villains that he beat. He looked at one of them, and said, Frostbite is probably going to hit you in about a couple of minutes, and you're probably going to die if I don't stop freezing you, so here's what's going to happen. You tell me everything that you know, and I'll stop since I want to be a hero. The villain looked at the boy, and he could tell in his eyes that this boy was dead serious, so he said, all right, what do you want to know? Everything. Fine, I don't know much really. All I know is that they told us that they were going to kill the symbol of peace and that they have some kind of all might. It was that purple bird thing. They called it Nomu. It was somehow created to kill him. I swear I told you everything I know, can you please stop? Todoroki then stopped his ice and began to walk away from the villains, but a cough drew his attention nearby. He looked and saw 3 of his classmates, and 3 of 1B, stuck to the ground from his ice. Abar then said, if it won't be too much trouble to ask, but can you please free us? I can do it myself, but the heat had all but weakened my vines significantly and so had your ice. Todoroki then walked up to them, but their eyes widened as a villain jumped from behind him trying to cut his head only for the boy to grab his weapon and freeze him on the spot saying, try to be quiet next time. I can hear you a mile away. He then stood in front of the students as he used his quirk to free them, and said, follow me, and try to stay out of trouble. In the earthquake zone, Tetsu punched another goon as Kirishima beside him grabbed someone and head-butted him into La La Land. The metal boy then looked at his counterpart and pouted asking himself how he was going to stand out, but that was a question for later, as he punched another goon. He then looked at Bakugo who was blowing villains left and right, and he had to admit for such an unmanly person, he was strong. Maybe, there was something when Midoriya said he would make a great hero someday, if he loses the attitude that is. Come on, you shitty villains, give me a good fight, Bakugo yelled as he blew a villain up. He then jumped toward a crocodile villain and activated his quirk frying him in an instant. Tetsu then looked at Kirishima who was acting like a fanboy toward Bakugo. The redhead then said, dude, that was so manly. Bakugo then began shouting at the red saying he doesn't need his compliments. Tetsu decided this was the best time to retreat and reunite with his friends since both of these guys had it covered. In the raindrop zone, there wasn't much of a fight as Komori was killing it there as she unleashed her mushrooms on the villains who ran away in fear for their lives. The young girl said, what happened for me being an easy target? Get away from us, you witch. One of the villains shrieked only to be smacked into a wall by Tokiyami's quirk Dark Shadow. Another villain was also having his head smashed into the ground courtesy of Kuwaro. The boy then popped from the ground saying, we can't rest. There's still many more we need to fight. Tokiyami nodded his head. In the mountain zone, Rin punched a guy in the gut sending a couple of his dragon scales in there saying, I have 20 goons, beat that. The tailed boy then spun around knocking 3 men as he said, Happily, he then punched a villain in the face before catching him with his tail and slamming head first into the ground, saying, 21. So we continue, Rin said as he armored his hand to protect it from a strike. In the flood zone, Setsuna sat on the boat as she tried to process a way to get out of her current situation. She was in the flood zone surrounded by villains on a boat with 4 other people, one of them being a pervert. She looked at Mineta and said, "Can you stop staring at me like I'm a piece of meat jerky? I'm trying to think a way out of this." The boy only continued drooling at her, making her cringe, and said, "I can't help it if you're smokin' hot." He was then hit in the head by Suyu, who said, "I'm sorry for him. He can be a bit too much sometimes." "Asui, why are you apologizing to 1B scum? We are the superior class, 1A. We shouldn't lower." The boy's banter was stopped when 2 fingers wiggled right in front of his face. He looked only to see a very angry Setsuna, who said in a deadly voice, "Shut up, you already caused enough problems as it is. We don't need more, got it?" The boy then gulped, saying, "Yes ma'am." "Neat. Kiro," Suyu said as she looked at the girl, saying, "Usually the only one who stops him is Momo with a blow dart to his neck." "Well, it's either you got it or you don't, Asui," Setsuna replied. "Please call me Sue," the frog girl said. "But how are we going to get out of here?" she asked the lizard girl, who then felt the ship shaking. She looked to the side only to see that the villains have managed to tear a hole into the side of the ship, and it would be a matter of time before it sank, and they became chewing meal for the villains. "Oh no, what are we going to do?" Setsuna then looked at Mineta, who was panicking from fear. "I don't want to die," before touching Momo Yaoyorozu's chest. A vein throbbed on Setsuna's forehead as it reached her max with the perverted boy, but she kept it in, so she can think of something. Yanagi then looked at the boy and said, "Are you sure you want to be a hero? Because all I see is a small perv who wants to peep on girls." The boy then looked at her and said, "Shut up woman, I'm afraid for my life. I don't want to face villains when I'm still a student right now. It's so scary." The boy then began to shiver as he hugged his legs. Monoma then said, "Ahem." He then drew the recommendation girl's attention. "Perhaps it would be more beneficial if we told you our quirks for you to come up with a plan." The girl nodded as she began explaining her quirk. "Okay, my quirk is Lizard Tail Splitter, and it allows me to disconnect my body parts to 30 pieces at max currently, that is, and I have some low healing factor." Yanagi then said, "Well, my quirk is Poltergeist, and it allows me to lift objects that are about the weight of an average human. And no, I can't fly us out of here because it doesn't work on me." The students of 1A then began introducing their powers, so Suyu began. "Well, mine is frog. It's kinda self-explanatory. I can do anything a frog can do, from sticking to walls, long tongues, and secreting small poison, and I can also swallow things and then vomit them sometime later. You know what, forget that last part." Monoma then said, "Well scum 1B, mine is called Copy. It allows me to copy quirks for 10 minutes. I can copy a total of 5 at once, but I can't use them all at once." Then Mineta explained, "Well, mine is called Pop Off. My hair is like very sticky balls which can stick to surfaces, even water, but the duration mostly depends on my health." A small silence enveloped the ship, as they all looked at Mineta, who then began crying out, "I know my powers aren't cool enough to be in the hero course." Setsuna then smacked him in the head, shutting him up, as she tried to think of a plan to save their skin from this problem. It took a couple of moments, before she finally formed a plan, and looked at the others with a smile. "All right, here's what we do." Back with Aizawa, the man was now jumping from villain to villain, kicking their butts, hoping to finish them off, so he can protect their students. He seriously feels ashamed that he didn't foresee this happening when the press managed to break into the school, but now there was no time for regret. He had to focus, or else the students will die on him. But the main problem lies that Vlad's problem children fell into the fray. He had long guessed that Monoma must have tried to use the mist villain's quirk to open a portal to the school, but it backfired, bringing class 1B instead, with all of its members. The hero ducked under a fist as he tried to think of a way to save the students. He then jumped into the air and kicked a villain in the face, sending him to the ground. A villain tried to rush him, but he used his scarf to grab his leg and spin him around, sending him into a group of thugs by his side. A villain with some kind of water manipulation tried to attack, only for his quirk to fail him mid-attack, and said villain was on the receiving end of a roundhouse kick to the face. The nighttime hero then kneed another one in the stomach, before wrapping his scarf around one of them and pulling him towards the hero, giving a good punch and knocking him out. But the thing is, he was a nighttime hero who wasn't used to huge crowds, and the bigger problem was the drawback of his quirk was getting higher and higher. With each passing moment, he can feel it becoming weaker. He then looked to his side and saw the leader of the group, who was standing there with a sick smile on his face. "Wow. You're so cool, Eraserhead." The man spoke, making the hero angry. The hero then dodged a swipe from a claw-like hand and then ducked under a hand with a mouth filled with sharp teeth. He then used his scarf, tying it around both crooks before slamming them together. He then looked at the leader of the attack, and he got an idea, thinking that if he was able to subdue the leader, he might be able to end this without any further incident. Aizawa looked to his side as he grabbed a punch from a man with a smooth round head, before clotheslining him in the jaw, and throwing him into other villains that were standing nearby. He then began running towards Shigaraki, who didn't seem bothered by that as he said, "So the NPC wants to play. Let's see what you got." Back at the entrance, 13 stood with the students as they looked at Kurogiri. The space hero then said to Iida, "Class Vice, you must go quickly to school, and try to bring reinforcements." The boy looked at her confused as he thought about what she said. What she was saying was true. He was the only one fast enough to go to school to inform them, but it felt so shameful to simply just leave his friends and comrades and just blot out of there. "But I can't do that, that's not how a hero does it." The boy tried to argue, but was cut off by the hero, who said, "Now's not the time to argue, Class Vice. Right now, this entire place depends on you, so try to go, and call help." The boy gritted his teeth in annoyance as he nodded. The living mist then appeared before them, saying, "How futile. Talking about your plans in front of me. You'll not succeed." 13 then told Iida, "Go." She then opened the cap on the fingers of her suit, trying to suck in Kurogiri, but he tricked her by opening a portal behind her, ripping apart her spacesuit, causing her students to call her in distress and worry as her back was almost disintegrated due to her quirk. He then looked at the hero students and said, "Now, what are you going to do, heroes?" The students looked at him, as some of them nursed the fallen hero, but one thing was common among them: they all wanted to defeat him. Back with Izuku and his companions, they have been walking for a while now in silence. Finally, Kamakiri said, "Come on, we can't just walk around like this without a plan. We need to regroup with the others or we will be sitting ducks." Everyone looked at him and understood what he meant, but his plan was only to reunite with the others at the entrance. But what will happen after that? They stopped a little to catch their breath and sat on the ground, but Juzo kept his eyes open just in case some idiot thought he can get the drop on them. He then sighed, saying, "We can rest for now, but we need a plan. Regrouping with the others, as Kamakiri said, is our main concern, but we need something after that. What if the villains are waiting for us outside? What if they have some sort of back plan in case we made it out?" Izuku then shook his head, setting down Uraraka as he said, "I don't think so. The villains seemed confident enough that they were going to kill us here, but the thing is that they don't know our quirks are." Kamakiri then asked, "So what, did they come here expecting us just to turn over all bugs the moment we see them?" Juzo then nodded, "It appears so. I bet that we're told that they were dealing with inexperienced children who will buckle under stress, but they were shocked when they found out what we can do." Uraraka then exclaimed, "And your arrival must have missed everything in their plans since they didn't put your class into consideration." Izuku nodded. "Uraraka, who is your teacher?" The girl took a moment to think, but said, "Honestly, I don't know anything about him except he's a pro hero. I mean, on day 1 he entered the class and threatened to expel anyone who came last in the quirk apprehension test." She then added, "He also wears some kind of scarf and yellow goggles." She then put her finger on her chin, asking, "Why did you ask, Midoriya?" The boy didn't answer as he was thinking about the pro's identity. Scarf, yellow goggles. The boy then smacked a fist into his hand as he said, "I recognize him now. He's the pro hero Eraserhead. His quirk is Erasure. It allows him to erase the quirks of individuals who he look at. He is mostly an underground hero who works in the night." The boy then began to sweat nervously as he said, "I think we should try to help her teacher." Juzo then said, "What? We can't. We'll get killed for sure." Kamakiri replied to his claim, "We were fighting villains for the last 5 minutes, I think we passed that point." He then pointed a finger toward Izuku saying, "He's right though. The guy is an underground hero, he's out of his element. Sure, no hero is a one-trick pony, but this is a person used to stalking criminals in the dark and kicking their butts. I don't know about you, but his steam will eventually run out. I say we only interfere if we see him in a tight spot." Izuku nodded his head saying, "Agreed." Juzo looked at them. "You surely are friendly toward each other today." Both boys then shrugged as Kamakiri said, "In life or death situations, all differences are put aside for the greater good." He then looked at something and told them, "I think we're beginning to enter another zone, so let's move it." Izuku tried to carry Uraraka, but she blushed as she said, "I'm fine now. There's no need to carry me." She then stood up as she joined the others, and began to walk. They finally reached the landslide zone, where they were met by something that disturbed them. Inside it, they saw Momo, Jiro, Sen, Bondo, Itsuka, and Yui all held hostage by some villain wearing a skull mask as he held Denki putting his hand near his head. Kamakiri was about to jump but was stopped by both Juzo and Izuku. He looked at them and said, "Hey, what's the big idea? You can't just jump like that. What if he saw you?" Juzo scolded him, causing the boy to huff. "We need a plan to save him," Izuku said as he thought a little, and then finally said, "Here's what we're gonna do." Back at the entrance, all the students stood stunned at the fallen form of their teacher, but they couldn't afford to dally around. They needed to find a way to distract the mist villain long enough for Iida to run out and contact the school, bringing reinforcements with him to help them all. They looked at the villain who they thought was smiling in glee when 13 fell, so he said, "Honestly, it's not your fault 13, you're a rescue hero. Combat isn't your strong suit, so don't feel bad when the kids die." The hero who was hoisted by Shishida cursed him under her breath, as she tried in vain to resist the pain she was experiencing. Iida looked at the villain, and said, "You will fail, villain. I will escape calling for reinforcements." The boy then began to run toward the door, but Kurogiri appeared right in front of him as he said, "You didn't think I was going to make it easy for you now, did you?" The armored hero came to a halt to avoid being sucked in and managed to swerve to the side. "I need to find a way to outpace him, or else I won't make it outside. Everyone's lives from both classes depend on it. Give up, heroes. No matter what you try, you won't be able to escape here, so just..." The villain didn't get to continue his speech as he suddenly screeched in pain, and felt something hit him in his brace. He then looked and saw a horse-like girl smirking at him. The girl then said in victory, "I knew it. Weak point is brace. Everyone attack brace." She then crouched down and lowered her head, aiming her horns at him as she said, "Horn cannon." Kurogiri's eyes widened as a storm of horns was then launched at him. The mist man managed to avoid most of them as he then looked at the horse girl, and said, "Enough of your pestilence, go away now." He extended his mist only for the girl to fly away using her horns under her armpits. The mist villain then noticed something coming at him, and barely missed a punch from Shishida, who went full beast. The punch caused the earth around him to shatter into small pieces, but the boy then lunged at him again. Kurogiri then tried to open a gate to get rid of him, but the boy still had enough common sense, or his primal instincts told him to dodge, so he rolled on the ground before ripping a chunk for it, and apparently threw it at the villain, but it missed. The villain then laughed. "You missed." He then noticed the smirk, and understood the boy's original target, the door to the entrance. He quickly extended his quirk and barely managed to stop the projectile. He sighed with relief as he knew that if the doors were opened, the speed boy's chance to escape would be greater. He then remembered the boy who was right in front of the door trying to par it open. The living mist then sent his mist toward him, but the boy jumped back, avoiding it as he said, "I was so close." Kurogiri then looked at them and said, "Give up, children, or better yet join us. This way we all walk alive from this." The reply to his offer was met by Shota using a rock from when Shishida shattered the ground and launched it at him, hitting him in the brace. The villain then screamed in pain, but Mina used this distraction to bypass him and walk to the front without him noticing. Once she was in front of the doors, she activated her quirk and tried to make a hole big enough for Iida to go through. "Come on, quickly. Please work, please work. I don't have much time, so please work quickly." The girl prayed in her mind as she began melting the door. Kurogiri, once he regained his focus, looked at the hero children with annoyance in his eyes as he said, "You children are nothing but an annoyance. I'd like to see your face when All Might smashes you into the next century," Zero said as he hefted 13 after Shishida handed her to him when he went to help Pony. Shishida then noticed something near the entrance, so he slowly transformed into his human mode, and told Iida, "Wait for my sign, Sir Iida, to run to call rescue for us." The armored boy then nodded at him. Kurogiri then laughed, "Talking about your plan in front of me." He then cackled saying, "What a stupid move. Don't worry, we'll succeed. I promise you that, my good sir," Shishida said. Shishida then looked to the side as he yelled, "Go, Sir Iida." The boy then began to run to the entrance, but the mist began to engulf him, so he mentally said, "Is this going to really happen? Did I really fail? I really failed you, big brother." He expected to be launched into one of the areas, but it never happened, causing him to stop. He looked back only to see Awase grabbing Kurogiri by the neck brace, and yelling at Iida, "Run dude run." The class representative of 1A then ran as he said, "Thank you for your trust. I will not fail you all for putting your trust in me." Awase then using his quirk wielded the mist man by the brace into the ground saying, "Hang tight, now." The mist villain refusing to lose then unleashed his mist trying to reach Iida, but he didn't as it was sucked by 13. He then tried to free himself by teleporting the ground he fused to without him, but when managed to free himself, it was already too late as Iida passed by Mina who yelled at him, "Go, Iida. Don't look back." The mist villain angered by this turn in events and sensing how the tides have turned right now tried to salvage the situation, but even to the best of his efforts, he couldn't do anything. First Shota sent a projectile hitting him in the brace and sending him to the ground once more. That was followed by Pony who launched 2 horns at him hitting him in the brace before lifting him in the air as she then ushered Zero to do his move. The tape user then sent a huge piece of tape from his elbow toward the villain causing it to stick to him. Finally, Sato grabbed the tape and began to spin around spinning Kurogiri with him, till he let go of the tape sending the villain flying, and with that Mina said, "I hope Iida reaches them in time." On the outside, Iida ran as fast as he said, "Come on legs. I need to be fast as I can. I need to reach the school." In the landslide zone, Momo, Jiro, Sen, Bondo, Itsuka, and Yui were standing, their hands lifted in the air as a sign of surrender. The reason was that during Kaminari's dumb time, he managed to stumble into the clutches of a villain who was hiding the entire time to avoid fighting. He looked at them, and said, "Now, isn't that good?" The villain looking at them was wearing a skull mask on his face as he put his hand close to Kaminari's head. He then looked at them one more time before saying, "Now, how are we going to solve this, heroes?" Itsuka glared at him. She wanted nothing more but to smash the man's head into the ground till he can't even remember his name, but she can't since Kaminari's life is on the line. She mentally cursed the boy for his quirk drawback, not that he can help it anyway. She then looked at her friends who were sweating slightly trying to avoid their classmate's death. Wonderful, just wonderful. Yaoyorozu looked at the villain who she knew meant business, as she tried to calculate a way to free Kaminari and themselves since right now they were all at the villain's mercy. She then looked at him saying, "Let my classmate go free at once." She knew it was useless to ask, but she then added the lie, "Crows are probably coming here any minute since they can't contact us, and they must have known that something is wrong by now. Maybe if you cooperate with us, you'll get a lighter sentence." The man chuckled as he said, "Keep talking, princess. You know what they say, keep lying till people begin to believe you." He then pointed his hand toward Kaminari who was babbling as said appendage began to sparkle with electricity, so he said, "But this is the real world, so you all better do as I say, or this boy gets it." Sen looked at him and then said, "You're the villain who's blocking the communication, aren't you?" The 1A students were shocked how he knew about that, but given that no one came for them, they knew he kinda figured it out. The villain snorted as he said, "So what, do one wrong move, and I promise you that this boy will be turned into fried chicken when I'm done with him," he said as his hand emitted electricity with the dumb mode of Kaminari shrieking in fear as he sensed the danger. He then said, "Listen here children, I'm kinda feeling a bit of commonship with other electric-type users. It's kind of a brotherhood of sorts." He then put his hand away from the boy's head as he said, "So here's what's going to happen. you're going to give up and hand yourselves over to me, or your friend will suffer for your choices. So what do you pick, heroes? Because the clock is ticking quickly, and you need to make a decision now. I just don't understand something, Jiro said as she looked the villain straight in the eye, grabbing his attention. The man looked at her and said, "What is it that you don't understand about my orders? I'm sure they're clear as day, or is it the standards of heroes fell so low these days that they let anyone enter the hero course?" The villain hoped this will get a rise from the girl so he can kill the boy, but the girl stayed as calm as ever. Jiro then added, "I mean that someone like you would make a perfect hero with that quirk of yours, so why become a villain?" This caused the others to look at her in confusion as they wondered why she was complimenting the villain holding her friend hostage. Kendo looked at the girl briefly but then looked away when she noticed the girl's earphone jack was slowly making its way toward her boots to send a sound attack to the villain. Momo noticed this too, so she joined Jiro. "I agree with her. You know it's not too late to become one. I'm sure that'd be willing to have such a resourceful person on their side. What are you two even trying to do at this point?" The villain said as he looked at them. "Do you actually believe that those sweet words are enough for me to actually give in? I mean, why not become one?" Jiro said, "You would have a license to use your quirk, respect, fame, money, and power." The girl said, hoping to keep doping him for a little longer. Her earphone jack was so close to her boot, but it didn't make it as the villain said, "Yeah, don't even try it, or else your friend will die today," he said while putting his hand near Kaminari's head while it crackled with electricity. The girl then retracted her earphone jack, as the villain mocked her. "I love how to tried to trick me by saying, you can become a hero, who do you think I am? Some all-might wannabe fan who needs encouragement in life." He then said, "Enough talking, now you will do as I say or none of you will make it out alive today." Everyone then began to panic, but Itsuka looked around for a way out and saw Yui's hand. It had a pebble in it, and if she used it right, it could in theory free them, but they needed a distraction to grab the villain's attention so they can attack. As if the heavens heard her words, the sound of rocks being moved echoed from behind the thug who looked behind him to check if someone was there, but that was what they needed in the first place. The silent girl of Class 1B then threw the pebble at the villain as he turned. She quickly then pressed her hands together, making the pebble become a boulder that hit him in the face. This caused the electric villain to let the blonde boy go from his hand, as he slowly stumbled away from him and toward the group. Momo, not wanting the boy to be trapped again in the villain's grasp, then formed a rope from her midsection and threw it toward Kaminari, who grabbed it. The girl then yanked him toward the group, causing him to crash beside them. Itsuka then rushed the villain, who was trying to recover from the hit, since the helmet took the brunt of the rock attack, so she activated her quirk as she punched him, causing the man to lose the air that was in his lungs as he gasped for breath. The girl quickly retreated as Sen followed her quickly. The grating boy then activated his quirk as his hands began to spin at high speeds, and he slammed it into the villain's abdomen, sending him flying into a wall. The boy then jumped back as Jiro then yelled, "Eat this, electricity boy." She then fired an enhanced heartbeat attack from her boots toward the villain, who screamed in agony and fell to the ground. The group then began to celebrate the villain's defeat, as Bondo approached him and covered him in his glue just to make sure that if the guy came back to the land of the living he wouldn't be much of a problem. "So what do we do now?" the glue boy asked the class presidents of both classes, but a voice from behind them said, "You guys go back to the entrance to try and wait with the others." They all then looked behind them and saw Kamakiri, who was frowning, with Izuku, Juzo, and Uraraka, who was leaning against a wall. The bug boy then said, "Well, it seems that we don't need your plan anymore, stutter. They figured it out on themselves, though they needed us just to make a distraction." "Wait, that was you guys?" Jiro asked. Izuku chuckled awkwardly as he said, "Yeah, I had Uraraka lift some rocks, and let them go to create a distraction so Kamakiri and I can attack him." Izuku then looked at Juzo, and said, "Can you still sink him though?" The skull-faced boy nodded as he went and sank the criminal, but then Kaminari came back, and said, "What happened, guys?" "You almost died," Jiro said causally. This caused the boy to yell in protest, but Momo then said, "Kaminari, can you try and contact the school now through your headset?" The boy tried and said, "Sorry guys, but these things are busted. I think they're broke." Momo then groaned as she concluded that the device broke when she pulled Kaminari toward them. Izuku then said, "Guys, you go to the entrance. Take Uraraka with you, I'll go with Honanuki and Kamakiri to see if other students need help." Kendo then said, "No way, I'm coming too. Kendo, you are the class rep, at least one of us has to be present, and it's not like we're going to hunt for villains. We're only going to try and bring the others back to the entrance." He then lifted his hand as he said, "Fist bump." The girl mentally argued with herself, but gave in as she thought that if some villains managed to come to the entrance, they need some heavy guns with them, so she said smiling, "Fist bump." The group of students was then divided with one going to the entrance, and the other going to the plaza. Back in the flood zone, Setsuna had just finished explaining her plan to the others. Everyone seemed on board, even Monoma, who still led a few jabs here and there talking about 1A, supremacy. The only one who didn't like the idea was Mineta, who screamed, "I'm too young to die." He then looked at the villains, and said, "Can't we wait till the heroes arrive?" "No, you coward, we might die before they arrive," Setsuna said before they then felt the boat shake entirely. She then looked down, and saw what happened. If the villains didn't break the boat before, they sure did now. The boat was now cut in half. She looked at her companions, and yelled, "Begin the plan now." Monoma then touched Setsuna's hand, and said, "I have your quirk now." Setsuna then broke apart as her hands grabbed Yanagi, and lifted her in the air with ease, and Monoma then broke apart himself with Setsuna saying, "Try to keep up." Tsuyu then began to ready herself to jump as she grimaced, grabbing Mineta with her tongue, and walked to the side of the ship. She then waited for Setsuna, who said, "Now, quickly." The frog girl then jumped in the air with Mineta, as the great boy then began to pick his hair, throwing his sticky balls toward the villains while he was crying, "For the girls, for the girls." Setsuna's parts with Monoma's then went toward the villains as they began to hit them with the parts from every possible angle. In this time, the ghost girl used her quirk to shuck pieces of wood and metal toward the villains and hit them in their bodies, while Setsuna tried to take her to safety away from the villains. Finally, after a while, the villains were now confused, and some of them were stuck together, and the pieces that attacked them were now gone. A shark-looking villain then asked, "Where are the kids? And what the fucking hell did just happen here?" Back with Setsuna, she and Monoma returned to the group. The green-haired girl then sighed as she said, "That was close. Now, let's go and reunite with the others." Monoma then said, "Let's go reunite with the others, so the Supreme Class, 1A, can protect you, Class, 1B, losers." Setsuna then gave a blank stare along with Yanagi, Tsuyu, and even Mineta, making the blonde boy sweat a little, as he said, "Too much. Way too much," Setsuna replied. She then turned her head saying, "Let's move before the villains collect their barring and attack us." Back with Aizawa, the hero grabbed a crook with his scarf, and kneed him in the face, before punching another villain who tried to sneak up on him. He then looked at the leader, who he felt was smiling under his mask. When he went to fight him, multiple villains blocked his path, so needed to take them down, before he took him. He then wrapped his scarf around two villains, as he jumped into the air, pulling on the ends of his scarf before he smashed them into the ground. Before he went down, kicking a villain in the face as he landed. He then looked at the boss villain, and made a run toward him, but as he approached the villain, the leader smirked under his hand mask saying, 30. The hero punched a villain who tried to stop him, before jumping an axe, kicking someone in the head, causing him to pass out. The masked villain then said, 24. The hero then jumped toward the villain as the man said, 18. The hero tried to punch him, but the villain dodged it, saying, 14. The villain then tried to hit punch Eraserhead, but the hero managed to dodge as the villain said, 8. The hero then managed to elbow the villain as the villain coughed, saying, 2. The villain then extended his other hand as he said, "You're amazing, Eraserhead. You're so cool. Your quirk is seriously one of the most amazing quirks ever. The ability to erase someone's quirk just by looking at them and no one can tell where are looking due to your goggles. But, you can tell when you blinked when," the villain said as Eraser blinked with his hair going down. "Your hair goes down." The villain then touched the hero's hand, causing it to begin to slowly crumble. This made the hero jump back as he clutched his injured hand. The hero was then attacked by a villain with lion hands, but he kicked him in the face, sending him to the ground. Another one with an oversized head tried to rush him, but Eraser suppressed all the pain he was feeling and punched him in the face. But then the villain wearing the mask said, "You're really amazing, Eraser, but I should tell you something." The hero growled as the villain shook his head and said, "I'm not the final boss." The hero then felt something loom over them as the hand villain said, "He is." The monster then lifted his large hand and brought it down on the hero as the hand villain laughed, saying, "Have fun, Eraser." Back with the others, Izuku just managed to make it to the plaza with Juzo and Toguru. They looked at the teacher of class 1A, and he seemed to be handling the situation really well. He then looked toward the other areas, and asked their friends, "So what do we do now?" "I say we go to other areas to help our friends," Juzo explained. "We don't know what kind of danger they might be facing, and unlike us, they might be in an area that's out of their element." Izuku nodded his head, imagining himself in a place where he can't use his quirk to the fullest, like the landslide zone, since it was already unstable as it is and didn't need super strength to disturb it even further. Kamakiri then said, "I don't know. I say we stay here, and wait to see if the teacher needs help. If he dies, this might give villains some kind of morale boost to fight back against us." The two other students nodded their heads, understanding where the boy was coming from. They then walked and came closer to the flood area, where they heard some shuffling in the water, but when they looked, they saw a couple of students making it up to the shore. Izuku looked at them and smiled as he saw Setsuna approaching them. The girl smiled seeing him, as she said, "Yo, Greenie, how has this been treating you? I know that I have been having fun here." The boy then said, "Well, I have to say it's an experience, to say the least, but nothing so bad that happened till now." Reiko then tapped Setsuna on the shoulder, and said, "Guys, we have some company." The girl said as she pointed toward the flood zone, as a couple of villains managed to sneak up on them, but Izuku then had an idea as he said, "Guys, you might want to take a step back." The boy then lifted his fingers as he pointed at the villains. He then yelled, "Delaware Smash." This caused a huge gust of wind to appear as Izuku flicked his fingers, causing the villains to be thrown away from them, and all of them yelled as they were sent flying away from them. Mineta then said, "Dude, you're crazy strong, but seriously you have to teach me how to." The great boy was silenced by Suyu hitting him with her tongue as she said, "Don't mind him. He wasn't going to say anything important." She then croaked in fear as she said, "Are you okay?" The girl asked as she pointed to his finger. The boy waved at her saying, "Yeah, it's no problem. I used to it by now." The boy then nursed his finger, which was broken beyond belief. The 3 feet 1A students couldn't help but feel a little bit disgusted by the injured finger, but the others barely flinched. From the side, they heard someone yell, "Hey guys, I'm here. I'm back." Everyone looked to the side and saw Tetsu coming near them, as he said, "I thought I lost you guys. Where's Kendo and Komori?" He then stood there as he tried to catch his breath from all the fighting he had where he was, and the long distance he ran to reach here. "Kendo's at the entrance, but I don't know where Komori is right now," Izuku answered honestly. Everyone then heard the alarms begin to ring across the entire facility, causing Mineta to say, "Thank goodness, help will arrive now." Izuku then said, "The guy who blocked the communications was taken out a while back, so it's kind of a surprise it took this long to finally activate and alarm the school." Setsuna then looked to the side, and her face paled as she said, "Guys, look at that." They all looked at where the lizard girl was pointing her finger, and they were sure that the scene will haunt their nightmares from now on till they graduate. Back at the school, the heroes were in full swing with Ectoplasm using his clones along with Hound Dog, All Might, Vlad King, and Midnight, looking for the children, each asking themselves how the school managed to lose a whole class. Vlad then came to the meeting room, and said, "I checked the entirety of the support course section. There was no sign of them." He then looked at Ectoplasm, and said, "What about you?" "My clones didn't find anything. I'm still searching," the ghost hero said, and then tried to reassure his companion saying, "Don't worry, Vlad. I'm sure that they're here." All Might then stood up saying, "I will go and search outside the campus." The hero then buffed up as he then went outside. The hero then walked around the school looking everywhere he can on the school premise and its surroundings, but he didn't find a single sign of the students. He then felt something smash into him. He looked down and saw Iida panting as he tried to calm his breathing down. The boy looked at him and said, "All Might. Quickly, you must go to the USJ. Villains attacked it. Class 1B, are there in the USJ? They're all in danger. I barely managed to escape." All Might's smile began to slip as he heard his phone ring, and it was Nezu. The man opened it, and said, "I know, and I'm on my way." He then looked at Iida as he said, "Young Iida, go to the school and tell everyone what happened. They already know, but inform them of the status in the USJ." The hero student then ran to the school, as All Might went to the USJ hoping to reach it in time. With Shigaraki, he stood on the downed form of Eraserhead, as he began to talk with the hero. He looked at him as Nomu began to wail down at him. The beast then grabbed his arm, twisted it, pinned him to the ground with his foot, and broke it. Shigaraki then said, "Look at yourself, Eraser, your quirk is truly strong, but when you fight against true strength and power you might as well be quirkless." The hero then grunted as he said, "You won't get away with this, and I won't let you hurt my students." Kurogiri then appeared beside Shigaraki, and said, "Shigaraki, I apologize, but one student managed to outpace me and went to the school to alarm them." They then both heard an alarm blare through the entire facility, meaning that the school was alarmed and reinforcements are on the way to help the students out, and the alarms went off, so I'm sure that the heroes will be here anytime, so I think we might want to retreat. Shigaraki then began to scratch his neck furiously as he said, "No, that's not supposed to happen. That's not supposed to happen." The man then calmed down as he took a deep breath, and then looked at Kurogiri as he said, "Damn you, Kurogiri, if you weren't my way out of here, I swear that I would have turned into dust right now." He then went quiet for a moment before sighing in defeat as he said, "Okay, there's nothing we can do here anymore, so let's go back home," he said, shocking the students watching them. This caused Mineta to cheer as he grabbed at Setsuna's chest saying, "That's good, we're safe." The girl in question then felt her blood boil as he grabbed the boy's head in a vice grip saying, "If you do that ever again, I swear that they won't find your body anymore, got it?" The boy then nodded his head in fear. Suyu then added, "Aside from Mineta's perversion, doesn't it feel wrong that he just wants to leave?" "Keep your guard up," Izuku said as Kamakiri added, "Something is happening that we don't know. Don't believe his words." And truly a moment later, Shigaraki turned around, and said, "But let's kill off the Heroes Society precious kids." He then began to run quickly toward the students, and stretched his hand toward Setsuna's face, as Izuku reacted quickly as he grabbed the girl, pulling her away, but the man managed to grab her hand, causing it to decay and turn into dust, but the girl disconnected her hand before the decay went further than her wrist, while Izuku asked her, "Are you alright?" The girl then said, "Yeah, it'll regenerate. Don't worry about me." Shigaraki then smiled as he said, "Well, I'll just make sure I grab your head next time." He then tried to run toward her, but Izuku beat him to the punch as he smashed his face, sending the man skidding against the ground. But what shocked the boy the most is when the villain began to whine like a small child saying, "No, no, no, an NPC like you couldn't touch me. I want you dead. I want you dead." He then stood up, and yelled, "Nomu." The hulking monstrosity that was keeping down Aizawa then appeared behind him. Shigaraki thought for a moment he could order his pet to kill the boy, but decided against it as he pointed his finger at the individual the boy risked his life to protect and said, "Kill the girl. This way he can make the boy's effort all in vain," as he watched the girl he tried to protect die in front of him. Time seemed to slow down as the monster appeared in front of Setsuna, but Izuku activated his quirk at 10% and jumped in front of her before the beast can land a hit. The boy then tried to hit the beast with a 100% punch, but the monster didn't flinch, shocking the boy for two reasons: one, his fist didn't break, and second, the monster barely flinched. The monster raised his hand to hit the boy, but before it can do any harm to both of them, Juzo quickly sank it into the ground, as he looked at Izuku saying, "Dude, you just had to anger the boss villain, didn't you?" Izuku then looked at Aizawa, and said, "Tetsuan, 1A, students take Eraserhead to safety, and try to treat his wounds." Tetsu then tried to argue, but Izuku left no room as he said, "Now, or he'll die." The metal boy, understanding the severity of the situation, then went to the fallen hero and picked him up with Tsuyu and Mineta along with Monoma, and they ran quickly to the entrance as Tetsu shouted back at them, "I'll be back." Shigaraki laughed as he said, "Well, that was a nice display of power, but Nomu, get out already." Everyone was confused till the beast began to struggle in the ground, and suddenly the ground shattered, leaving dust particles as the hero students looked, and saw the hulking monster look at them with empty eyes. Shigaraki then said, "Good. Nomu, go and kill the hero students." The beast launched at them as Izuku, Juzo, Setsuna, and Tagaru readied themselves to fight, but suddenly the doors of the USJ burst open, revealing a new figure have arrived. "Have no fear." "Why?" All the students looked up and saw All Might at the entrance, but he wasn't smiling. The man was frowning as he said, "Because I am here." All the villains looked at him, as they said, "All Might is here. Ready yourselves to beat him up." However, all the villains were down at a moment's notice as the hero destroyed every last one of them, before quickly going and grabbing the children, as he punched Shigaraki, causing the man to lose his hand mask on his face. The hero then took all the hero children to the top and put them out of the zone of danger, and into a safe place. He then looked and saw the downed form of Eraserhead. The large hero then said, "I'm sorry Eraserhead. I should have been here from the beginning, but I promise I'll take care of everything now." The Erasure hero then groaned but didn't say anything. All Might then walked to the fight as he was readying himself to fight, but he was stopped by Izuku, who said, "All Might." The hero looked at him, and the boy then said, "That thing. I punched it with 100% of my quirk, but it just shrugged it off." The boy then looked at the hero, who smiled at him as he raised a thumbs up, and said, "Don't worry young Midoriya, I got this." The hero then raced down to the field as he went directly to the fight, and said, "Last chance, give up." The man then saw the villain with the blue hero throwing some kind of tantrum as he reached for the hand mask that was on his face and said, "Father, father, who did this to you?" He then put the hand on his face, calmed down, and he looked at the hero with malice in his eyes. Shigaraki then scoffed, "I didn't come all this way just to throw the towel now." He then scratched his neck as he said, "Now why don't you have some fun with Nomu? He's been waiting for you all this time. It would be rude to keep him waiting." The hero then looked at the beast, and he had to admit that it sure was something. It was almost his size if not larger, but this was something that could wait for another time. The hero then ran toward it as he yelled, crossing his hands, "Carolina Smash." The attack caused vibrations in the air, but the beast barely flinched as its body rippled a little, but nothing more. This shocked the hero as he prepared another attack, yelling, "Texas Smash." The hero punched the beast, but the monster met his fist as it punched back, but what happened next shocked All Might even further. The monster's arm and its body rippled like some kind of recoil absorption, before aiming a punch at the hero, but he ducked and threw a punch of his own toward the beast's head, causing it to back away momentarily. The hero then heard clapping coming from the back when the hand-covered villain came, and said, "Are you having fun playing with Nomu, All Might?" He then pointed to the beast saying, "You know it was made specifically to kill you. Symbol of peace." He then laughed a little as he said, "You can punch it as much as you want, but Nomu has shock absorption. The only way to thoroughly end it is to tear it into bits and pieces, shove it head first into the ground so it won't move anymore." The hero then smiled as he said, "Really, thanks for the information." The hero then rushed toward the beast, who got up, but before it can do anything, All Might grabbed it from behind and bent to smash it into the ground in hopes of defeating it before he can put his attention to the other villains who dared and attacked his students. Beside the entrance, Izuku watched the fight with amazement as he saw how All Might is fighting the villain with non-ending resolve. Tetsu then came near him, and he said, "Man, All Might is so manly. No wonder he's the #1 hero." Izuku nodded his head, but then saw something that scared him. He looked and saw Pony. He grabbed the American girl's hand, and said in her native language, "Pony, send your horns and move All Might out of danger." The girl looked down and saw that a portal was slowly opening under the hero, as he tried to smash the villain into the ground. She waited no more as she sent 4 horns while Izuku jumped down to the plaza with Tetsu following him, saying, "Don't leave me out of the fun too." They were also joined by both Juzo and Kamakiri, with the other students trying to stop them, so Itsuka said, "Man, these guys are major idiots. What do you think, Set?" She then looked at the girl who was zoned out, and said, "Set, are you okay?" The girl then shook her head as she said, "Yeah, I just hope Midoriya knows what he's doing." "Don't you mean Midoriya and the others?" "Yeah, right." All Might was about to smash the villain into the ground when he felt something go under his armpits and drive him away from the villain to a spot where he wasn't in his grasp anymore. At first, he thought that it was another one trying to help his associates, then noticed it was four horns like the quirk of one of his students. But why did she interfere? He looked to the Nomu and got his answer. In the place where he was planning to smash the villain into the ground, there was a portal. The hero then said, "So this was a trap." Kurogiri then said in disappointment, "True, but sadly it didn't work out the way we wanted it to." The hero then heard movement beside him as he saw four of his students down there with him, so he yelled, "Kids, what are doing here? Get out before you get injured." Izuku then said, "With all due respect, All Might, but we're not leaving." Tetsu then said, "Yeah, that thing seems like a handful. Let's take care of the Misty and Handy guy over there." Juzo then added, "This way they won't spring more traps on you anymore." Tagaru then told him, "Plus, we're already knee-deep in trouble with Vlad Sensei. It won't matter if we add some more to the list." The hero couldn't help but smile at his students' bravery, as he stood up and looked at the villains and said, "All right, young heroes, but if it gets too hot for you, I want you all to retreat." The boys nodded their heads as the head villain then said, "Such a weak show." He then looked to his Misty companion and said, "Kurogiri, go and kill these brats." The Mist villain nodded his head as he turned his attention to the younger heroes and said, "Nothing personal, but I need you all too." Boom! And out of nowhere came Bakugo jumping onto the villain as he said with a crazed smile on his face, "And you thought you'd get away from me forever? I know your weakness is the brace." The villain tried to move, but the bomb boy then activated his quirk a little as he said, "Don't even think about moving, you fuck, or else I swear I'll blow you up so badly that they will be cleaning your bits and pieces for months." Kirishima then arrived at the scene and said, "Man, what you're saying isn't very heroic, you know." Shigaraki at this point was becoming disturbed real quick real fast as he turned to Nomu, but suddenly the beast got frozen in ice. When he looked around, he saw a trail of ice leading back to a dual-colored kid. The boy then said, "Your plan to kill All Might ends here." Shigaraki then began to laugh as he said, "Man, children these days are becoming really good. I mean, look at them right now, they're making us look like real rookies." He then snapped his fingers and said, "Nomu, go and retrieve Kurogiri." The monster then began to break through the ice that coated its body, but it ripped its flesh in the process, losing its leg and the left upper half of its body. No one understood what happened till the beast began to regenerate its missing limbs. This made All Might exclaim in shock, "I thought it had shock absorption." Shigaraki laughed as he said, "But it also has regeneration, All Might. As I told you, it was made to defeat you." The beast then moved out of the way toward Bakugo, but before the boy can blink, a huge shock followed by a huge dust cloud threw him away, freeing Kurogiri from him. Kirishima then said, "Wow, you stopped it." The boy then replied, "I didn't even see it." When the dust cloud cleared, it revealed All Might holding Nomu at bay, as he looked at Shigaraki and said in anger, "Have you no mercy? To attack a child with full intent on killing him." The villain chuckled saying, "Well, he was holding our gate and escape route, so I had to save my comrade." He then added as the Mist Man appeared beside him, "And what can you say about your student attacking my friend? You know violence only breeds violence. And the thing is that we weren't so different. You people government are only licensed to harm others while we aren't." All Might then scoffed as he said, "Save the lectures, villain. We both know that this is one of your sick reasoning that you use to harm others. If you were against violence, you wouldn't have come here to kill innocent children who have done nothing to you." The villain laughed as he raised his hands saying, "You caught me, All Might. Now Nomu, end him." The two hulking figures then began to clash, but Izuku in the meantime began to formulate a plan to defeat the beast-looking one. "Guys, I have a plan, but I need everyone's attention." Bakugo then tried to yell, but Kirishima silenced him as he said, "We're all ears." The boy nodded his head as he said, "First, I want you, Tetsu, and Kamakiri to engage the Mist villain so he wouldn't interfere anymore, and the same thing with you, Kachan. Go and deal with the hand-covered villain because you're the only who can take care of him, but beware, he has some kind of decay quirk." The boy then freed himself from the redhead's grip and said, "I'm not doing a fucking thing you say, Deku. but I only want to put that hand fetish creep in his place, so don't think you're better than me. Everyone looked at him as he continued. Alright, moving on from this. Juzo, I want you to soften the ground that Nomu thing after I blast it with my finger flicks. He then looked at Todoroki, and I want you to freeze it when it becomes into the ground so that way All Might can defeat it faster. The dual-haired boy didn't want to listen to his plan, since he didn't like anyone giving him orders other than the teachers, but right now everything was going to hell, so he only nodded his head. Now go. Quickly Bakugo blasted through the air toward Shigaraki as he said, Hand freak, come and get some. He then launched a blast toward him, making sure to keep some distance between them due to his quirk. Tetsu, Kirishima, and Kamakiri then began tackling the mist villain, preventing him from interfering with Bakugo. Finally, Izuku looked at All Might as he yelled, All Might, back away. The hero saw his successor readying a blast, so he stepped out of the way when a huge gust of wind hit Nomu, stunning it, but it was more than enough for Juzo to sink it into the ground up to its torso, followed by Todoroki, who froze it. Izuku then held another one of his broken fingers, as he said to his hero, when it breaks free, defeated All Might. The hero nodded as the monster then broke free and began to regenerate. He quickly rushed to the beast, and began to punch it as hard as possible as he said, You said that this monster of yours has some kind of shock absorption, not nullification, so that means it must have a limit. The hero then proceeded to punch it repeatedly, causing huge gusts of wind to appear in the plaza as his students stopped their attacks on the villains and regrouped. So that means to defeat it, I must go beyond my limits. I must go beyond, plus ultra, the hero finished as he punched the monster a punch so hard it caused its body to collapse from the inside, and it was sent flying into the dome of the USJ, smashing through it and into the sky. This attack caused so much pressure that Tetsu had to turn to his metal form and grab both Kamakiri and Izuku to prevent them from flying. Juzo had to sink himself in the ground, and Todoroki had to put some ice to handle himself, but sadly Kirishima and Bakugo went flying back. When the hero finished, he looked at the villains as steam erupted from his body and said, In my prime day, a punk like this would only have taken me 5 hits, but today it took 100 mighty blows to end this. Shigaraki then began to get angry as he said, He cheated. He cheated. Sensei said that was weaker, but he was still strong as ever. No way, he has cheated. The hero then lifted his fist and said, So now evildoers, what are going to do? Shigaraki then kept throwing his temper tantrum until the living mist pointed out something. Shigaraki, look at him. The villain then looked at All Might, who looked worse for wear, as Kurogiri then said, Right now, he's seriously weakened. We still have a shot to kill him. Shigaraki then smiled as he said, You're right. All Might then mentally prayed that the villains retreated or that the heroes arrived anytime soon, so he said, Afraid now, villains? Shigaraki then laughed as he said, You can act all you want, but right now you can barely stand. He then ran toward him, as he stretched his hand, but suddenly he heard a voice that yelled, Stay away from All Might. It was Izuku who intercepted the villain faster than the latter could comprehend and faster than what the Mist Man can do. This was followed by a punch to the face from Izuku, who sent him sailing, as Kurogiri said, Young master. The living mist then reappeared beside him as he said, Are you alright? The villain said, Yeah, but I want to kill that boy. Izuku, who stood beside All Might, said, If you to get near him, you need to get past me. The hero meanwhile mentally said, Young Midoriya, thank you for buying those few moments. The hand villain then said, That can be arranged. He then thrusted his hand forward as Kurogiri opened a portal toward the boy. Izuku was shocked when the hand was right in front of his face but was relieved when a bullet went through it. He looked backward, and saw Iida saying, I've returned with the cavalry. All the students cheered as the teachers began to take out the villains, but Shigaraki then nursed his hand that was shot as he said, Let's get out of here. The villain was then shot by Snipe, the shooting hero, in the other hand, and the legs caused Kurogiri to teleport them away. Izuku then collapsed to the ground as the last thing he saw was a scrawny-looking All Might, and a wall forming between them and the other students. All Might said in his weak form, Good work, young Midoriya, rest now. The last thing he thought of was, Recovery Girl is not going to let hear the end of this. Inside a bar far away from UA, a dark portal opened, and it threw out both Kurogiri and Shigaraki, who was lying down on the ground, and began to rub his bullet wounds. Kurogiri then stood up, and went to a cabinet and said to the blue-haired man, I will bring the medical kit to treat your wounds, young master. This was met by annoyed mumbling from the blue-haired man who was still angry at how things played out today, and angry that some lowly hero brat managed to hit him not just once, but twice. He actually managed to hit him twice. He was so angry, he wanted to leash out and dust everything that was in his path. He then looked around and said, "How the fuck did this go so wrong? We were so close to defeating All Might, so how did it turn so badly?" The screen behind him then came to life and a voice full of power and authority then echoed, managing to silence the young man. "Tell me, young Tamura, how did your little adventure play out? I hope everything did go to your liking." "Sensei, you were wrong. All Might. He's still strong as he ever was. He was able to keep up with Nomu." This caused a moment of silence to sweep the entire bar as the figure on the other end was thinking to himself. "I wasn't wrong, young Tamura," the man answered honestly, but then added, "But perhaps I've been a little bit over-optimistic." He then hummed a little and said, "Don't worry, young Tamura. This in theory could help us. I bet that the heroes now think that we're some lowly gang of criminals and are underestimating us, so it wasn't a total loss in the end." This was met by the young man saying, "Yes, Sensei." Tamura knew that his sensei knew better, and always wanted the best for him. Another screen then lit up as another voice then asked, "So the raid failed? I see." The voice then stopped for a moment and then asked, "What happened to the Nomu? Did you manage to retrieve it? I can do more experiments to see where it failed." "Nomu? Huh." Shigaraki scoffed as Kurogiri answered the other figure, sadly, "But All Might was able to defeat Nomu, and we weren't able to retrieve it due to certain circumstances." The living mist stopped a little as he thought about how to tell him what happened. All Might defeated Nomu by literally blasting it through the USJ dome, so I wasn't able to trace it and find it. The mist finally added, "If you want, I can go and search for it and retrieve it for further experimentation." The living mist then went quiet as he waited for a reply. He was shocked when the other figure replied, "No need for it. If anything, we have to lay low right now." Tamura then said, "But there's someone who annoyed me the most there, Sensei." This caught the figure's attention and he asked the boy, "And who is the kid who caught your attention, young Tamura?" The young man then yelled, "It was some green-haired boy that managed to punch me twice. He was also the reason that I wasn't able to kill All Might. If he didn't interfere, I would have been able to turn that symbol of trash into dust." The man-child then clenched his fists as he said, "I want to kill that boy, Sensei." The man chuckled and said, "Let me check the roster of students, young Tamura." The man then began to search the roster he had of class 1A, but he wasn't able to find a student that had a green-haired student, or at least a boy, since he did manage to find a green-haired girl with a mutation quirk that made her like a frog. He then asked the boy, "Tamura, I'm sorry, but are you sure that there is such a student?" "Yes, Sensei. He's some NPC that dropped from the sky when that copycat quirk user tried to use Kurogiri's quirk." This cleared everything for the man. He now lifted the roster of class 1B, which he asked Tamura to get just in case the other class showed up, and it seems due to a mistake of one of the hero students, they did show up. And he scanned the roster, and he then finally found two male students with green hair. One looked like a bug while the other was normal looking. He then asked the boy, did have some kind of mutation, or was he normal looking? The man then replied, "No, Sensei, he was as normal as everyone. I don't think he had a mutation, but he was ridiculously strong." This caused the man's mouth to twitch up in a small grin. The man then laughed and said, "Truly, young Tamura, you have eyes for details. That kid is an interesting person that came across your path." The man then read out the boy's information. His name is Izuku Midoriya. His quirk is called Inner Energy Manipulation, which allows him to use stored energy inside his body to increase his physical capabilities, including super strength and super speed. But the interesting thing is that his quirk, the man then laughed a little, manifested recently after he had an interaction with All Might due to the slime villain. The young man nodded his head, remembering that event when All Might managed to save two students for the villain. This caused the man to say to the young villain, "Rest well, young Tamura, because the next time you appear you're going to show this world how a symbol truly acts like." The young man nodded his head, but then he winced in pain as Kurogiri began to treat his wounds, and he grumbled in annoyance, "Did they seriously have to shoot me through both my hands and legs?" Back at the front of the USJ, All of the students were standing and talking with each as they waited to have their statements taken individually, so they can go home. They all looked and saw a man wearing a raincoat and a hat walk close to them, and he said, let me see. 36, 37, 38, 39. Okay, great. I can see that all of you students from both classes are here. He then felt someone tap his shoulder. He turned to see a green-haired girl. Setsuna asked him, Mr. Detective, what happened to our teachers? And what happened to our friend Izuku Midoriya? The boy with green hair like mine, and the cute freckles on his cheeks. He was kind of with All Might when you all arrived. The man smiled at her, and explained, first, your teachers are all fine and dandy and we were able to stabilize their condition using Recovery Girl's quirk. I can assure you that both 13 and Eraserhead are doing fine right now, and will both make a full recovery after receiving the appropriate treatment. He then hummed a bit as he continued, as for your friend, don't worry. He's fine. He was taken with All Might to your school, so Recovery Girl can treat them both, and make sure that they're in tip-top condition. He finally added, but right now, I need you all to ride the bus to go to the school, so that Officer Sansa can take your statements. The girl nodded her head as she saw two other students cooing over the mentioned officer who had a cat's head. The girl walked, but a hand stopped her. She turned to see Itsuka who asked, so what did he tell you? Is Midoriya okay? Are our teachers fine? Are their injuries fatal? The girl then grabbed her shoulder making Setsuna wince in pain from her strength. The girl quickly answered, they're all fine, but can you leave my shoulder alone because I'm going to need surgery if you start using your strength aspect unchecked. The orange-haired girl blinked as noticed that she was truly applying the strength aspect of her quirk without noticing. The girl then took her hand away smiling sheepishly as she blushed a little in embarrassment. Itsuka then gained a smirk as she said, I heard your talk with the detective. This caused Setsuna to raise her eyebrow as the other girl carried on, so you think that Midoriya's freckles are cute? This made the splitter quirk user blush quickly as she said, well, it's a trademark of him. I mean you can't deny that they look a little bit cute. She then turned her head to the side as Kendo chuckled at her friend's embarrassment and said, I suppose that you're right. The green-haired girl then rubbed her arm as she said, I really hope he's all right. I mean he seemed winded out when he was taken out of the USJ. She then lifted the stump where one of her hands used to be saying, and I really hope that my hand grows back quickly because this really sucks on so many different levels. Both girls then chuckled as they loaded themselves onto the bus with their friends to go to school. Back at Ua, Izuku woke up with a ringing in his head. He turned in his bed only to see All Might. The hero who was already awake smiled at the boy and said, young Midoriya, I'm glad that you're all right. I was afraid that you were going to spend the night here, but turns out my worries were for nothing. The boy smiled at the hero as he said, thanks All Might. Tell me, how are you feeling right now? The hero then told him, I'm feeling quite well young Midoriya. And by the way, thank you for helping me defeat that Nomu villain. Today, you were a true hero. The boy felt his heart clench as his hero complimented him. The hero was then smacked over the head by a cane, as Recovery Girl then said, don't compliment his recklessness. He could have hurt himself worse than he already did, but then again he didn't hurt himself too bad today, so that's something. Izuku was confused about whether to consider this a compliment or an insult, but he settled for the former. Suddenly the door of the infirmary opened, and the detective from earlier walked in. He greeted All Might in a casual fashion, shocking Izuku, who said, All Might, does he knows about your normal form? The hero nodded his head, as he then addressed the man, Tsukauchi, is that you? So you did show up after all. The detective then sat close to All Might as he said, now take it easy, All Might. You already fought hard, and before you ask everyone's fine. No need to worry. This made both the hero and hero in training sigh in relief. The man then added, they all fought bravely and did well considering that they're still students. He then said, in addition to that, we managed to find that Nomu thing that you told us about. It was in the middle of a field somewhere away from the USJ. It didn't move, protest, or so much as blink, so we were able to apprehend it with no problems whatsoever. The hero then nodded his head, as he stood up and said, all right, thanks Tsukauchi. You can go now. And with that, the detective left to collect the statements of the students. All Might then said, I'm going to talk to Principal Nezu, young Midoriya. Do you need anything before I leave? No, All Might. And with that, the hero exited the room, leaving behind him Recovery Girl and Izuku. The woman then said, "You can drop the act. So tell me, what's wrong?" she asked in a motherly tone. Even though she yelled at the boy, it was because she cared about him. The boy then looked down as he said, "I feel useless. I tried to fight off that Nomu thing, but I didn't even manage to make it blink. I pushed my body beyond its limits, but I barely was able to make it flatter." Recovery Girl nodded her head, as she said, "You want to become stronger, don't you?" "Yeah, I want to become strong so that I can protect the people I care about. I want to become stronger so I can save more people." The old woman smiled at him as she remembered a younger All Might also wanting to push himself. She then thought of something and nodded to herself. Perhaps, this way he can control his power more and would stop coming here. I truly don't want him to lose his body due to his recklessness. "Well, I have an idea," she said as she wrote something on a small piece of paper. She then handed it over to Izuku saying, "This is the phone number of All Might's previous teacher. I'm sure that he will be able to help gain greater control over, One for All, so call him as soon as you can. I don't want to see you hurting yourself anymore." The boy nodded his head as he looked at the number. Suddenly, the door was flung open and he saw his friends and Hound Dog entering the room. Setsuna and Kanoko then jumped him and hugged him saying, "Are you all right?" The boy blushed heavily and so did Kanoko, who immediately withdrew, and covered her red face. The boy then chuckled a little as he moved Setsuna, who was hugging him, in a vice grip and said, "I'm fine, guys. Seriously, there's no need to worry about my health." His friends were highly skeptical of that but decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. He was then smacked by Setsuna on the head as she said, "You idiot, do you know how scared you made me when you jumped to take a hit for me from that monster? I could have disconnected my body and avoided the blow. I truly thought that you were going to die at that moment." The boy lowered his head in shame as he made his friend worry about him, but then she said, "But still, thank you for risking your life for me, Midoriya." He looked up to see her smiling at him. It wasn't her usual teasing smile, but it was a happy, genuine smile. She quickly added with a cheeky smile, "You're my hero." This made the boy blush a little, given that the girl called him her hero and was still hugging him. "But you still have to make up for me." He then looked at her in interest, wondering what she wanted him to do. "So how about you go out with me and the others Sunday to have fun?" The boy's eyes widened in happiness as he nodded his head quickly, excited to spend some time with his friends. He then looked to the side and remembered that Hound Dog was still there, and he asked him, "Hound Dog Sensei, how can I help you? Do you want me to do something for you?" The hero then shook his head, as he said, "No, Midoriya, I just wanted to talk to you about your first session with me." The boy looked at him in interest, but the hero continued, "Today was supposed to be your first session, but given what happened, I'm more than sure that you want to go home and relax a little after fighting for your life." The man looked at the student as he asked him, "Do you want to have your session before you go to hang out with your friends?" The boy scratched the back of his head in confusion as he asked, "I don't know. Doesn't the school close on weekends? I mean, I don't want to cause any problems for you in the school." The dog hero then shook his head as he said, "That's no problem, Midoriya. UA works on a free system. We can literally do whatever we want in here, and no one is going to question our actions." He explained to the young man before he repeated his question once more, "So tell me, Midoriya, do you want me to schedule a session for you on Sunday?" The boy thought for a moment, but he answered, "All right. Let's do it, Hound Dog Sensei. I'll come here on Sunday at about 10 in the morning." He looked at the hero as he asked, "Is that fine by you, Sensei?" The dog hero nodded his head, as he said, "All right, 10 it is." The hero then thought about something. "Do you want to bring someone as emotional support, Midoriya?" The boy tilted his head in confusion, as he asked the hero, "What is that?" The hero then explained to him what he meant. Emotional support during a therapy session is someone who helps when you talk about yourself, and keeps you calm if you felt uncomfortable. It's basically someone to help you throughout the entire thing. The boy shrugged his shoulders as he said, "I think it would be nice to have someone to support me during the entire thing, but it mostly depends on my friends, cause my mom really works hard during the day, and I don't want to inconvenience her." He looked at his friends, as he saw Tetsu give him a thumbs up, Kanoko with a small smile on her face, while Kendo nodded her head. Kendo then thought of something which caused her to smirk at the lizard girl who unconsciously knew that her friend was up to no good. Kendo said, I think that Setsuna should be his emotional support. Those two were best friends since the beginning of the year, so she would be the best choice for emotional support. The dog hero looked at Izuku, who nodded his head since he believed that the girl was truly his true first friend in a long time. Setsuna, on the other hand, gave Kendo a dirty look that basically called her a traitor, but she accepted nonetheless. When they all exited the infirmary, they all walked home as they planned what to do on Sunday and where they are planning to go. In the principal's office, a weakened All Might sat with Nezu as they discussed something. I fear that he may be back. Back in the USJ, that hand villain known as Shigaraki said that Nomu was made up of multiple quirks, and we both know that only he can do that. Nezu looked at the symbol of peace, and asked him, are you sure, All Might? I mean, it could be an associate of his. All Might nodded as he added, think about it. How many people do you know that can give people multiple quirks? What worried me the most is that he said that Nomu was made to fight me. Nezu's eyes widened as he asked, do you think that there's more of these things out there? The little creature then rubbed his chin as he said, that means we must work to find the source, or else we'll have those Nomu things crawling everywhere in a couple of weeks. Nezu then asked All Might, did you tell your successor about this? The hero then blushed and scratched the back of his head as he coughed, saying, no, not really. I thought that he was dead for the time, but now this raises a new challenge in the face of young Midoriya. I just don't want to burden him with this type of information yet. Plus, I'm afraid if I told him that the boy might overwork himself trying to control, one for all, quicker destroying his body in the process. Nezu could only shake his head. He truly understood where All Might was coming from, but he couldn't withhold this type of information any longer. He needed to tell the boy in case the worst happened, and he needed to tell him now. But the other point he was making was right on point, and from what All Might told him about the boy is that he's a hard worker who doesn't know when to quit. During his training to clean the beach, the boy sometimes went against what the hero prescribed for him, so Nezu needed someone who reels in Midoriya when he goes on a tangent with his training. Then it hit him, he can ask for his help. The man was a good teacher. Sure, he was strict, but strict is what Izuku needed to help him advance, and at the same time not go overboard. He then looked at All Might as he said, All Might, I think I found a solution to our little problem. The hero smiled as he turned to face him. Really, that's wonderful. The hero stopped dead in his tracks, as he saw Nezu hold on his face an unreadable smile that usually promised pain to those who saw it. He then understood what he meant. No, anyone but him. Don't you want the best for young Midoriya? The rat said, making the hero bite his lip, and don't tell you're still afraid of him. The hero looked away as Nezu said, he's an old man away from his prime and golden days. Anyway, don't forget to call him today, while I do the necessary things needed from him to come. The rat then left the hero gaping, as he looked at his phone, not knowing that this call will happen faster than he thought. When Izuku finally reached home, he walked to his room. He knew that he had at least 3 hours before his mom came home, and smothered him in worry, but he can only hope that the news didn't catch the drift that both classes were involved in the attack, or his mom won't let him live this down. He sat in his room, as he opened his phone, and removed from his pocket the paper note that Recovery Girl gave him after he told her he wanted to improve. He read the name of All Might's old mentor, and it was Gran Torino, and he was shocked since he didn't even hear of this name once. He opened the net and searched through it looking for the name, and he saw that the man was once a homeroom teacher at UA and currently he was a retired pro. And his reputation preceded him. The guy was an absolute nightmare for students. His training regimes were known to be brutal. He was known as Hand First Trainer, or as his previous students would like to call it, beating to an inch of their lives. The boy was afraid for a moment, but then he remembered the USJ today, and how he felt helpless against the Nomu, so he steeled himself as he called the number. He waited for a couple of minutes, but the line was disconnected, causing him to sweat drop as he thought, he must have thought that I'm some type of phone salesman. The boy called him again, only for him to receive the same treatment as the previous attempt. He tried another time, but he had the same result. He then tried for the 4th time, but this time he was met by an old voice yelling through the line, "Leave me alone. I don't want to buy whatever you want to sell." The man then tried to close the line only for Izuku to quickly stop him saying, "Wait, I'm not some salesman. I called you so you can help me with my quirk." The retired hero then stopped, as he said, "Who in the world are you?" Izuku breathed in relief as he saw that he finally drew the attention of the pro. Izuku then introduced himself saying, "I'm Izuku Midoriya, and I'm a student at UA. And I want you to help me with my quirk." The retired pro then said, "And why in the world would I want to help you of all people?" Izuku then said, "Because I'm All Might's apprentice," he said, emphasizing the apprentice part. Once the voice on the other line went quiet, he knew that he grabbed his attention, so he continued, "And I want you to help me with my quirk. I want to improve, so I can become stronger." This was followed by a brief silence, but Gran Torino then said, "And who are you again?" This made the boy fall to the ground, but he stood up and explained everything to the man again. The man listened to the boy, as he said, "Listen up, kid, I'm coming by Monday to your school to train, and by then I want you to train that full cowling of yours to the max, because I'm not All Might, and I'm not going to coddle you like he does, got it?" "Yes, and I'm looking forward to working with you," Izuku said. The man on the other side of the line laughed as he said, "Let's see if you're going to keep that spirit, once I'm done with you." Once he finished the call, Izuku sat on the bed as he asked himself mentally, "What in the world have I gotten myself into?" Back with Torino, the man dialed a number, but when the line opened up, he screamed at the top of his old lungs, "Toshinori, you moron." Sunday came quickly, and Izuku was now on his way to UA to have his first therapy session. He was wearing a white t-shirt and some blue jeans. He walked to the gates of the school only to be met by a sight that made him blush like crazy. He was met by Setsuna, who was wearing a long green dress hoodie and some black jeans with some strapped heels. He could only think of one thing, beautiful. The boy then shook his head as he tried to clear his mind from these types of thoughts, since he didn't want to abuse his friend's trust by having thoughts about them in the wrong matter. On the other hand, Setsuna was having similar thoughts, and she wasn't regretting them in the least. He looked seriously hot. They both stared at each other for a full minute, before snapping out of their hypnotized state and greeting each other. Izuku then walked inside the school with the girl following him inside to go to Hound Dog's office, so he can begin his therapy session. Once they reached there, Izuku felt a little nervous, so Setsuna grabbed his hand and squeezed his hand, and they both entered the office. They looked and saw Hound Dog waiting for him. Both students greeted him. The hero then pointed to a chair and told Izuku to take a seat. Once he was near him, the hero pulled out a clipboard, and said, "Midoriya, this will be a simple talking to session. I just want to know about your life during your quirkless years. Tell me how you felt about it." The boy looked at him. "Well, it was mostly good. I mean, it was sometimes hard, but it wasn't really that hard." The hero raised an eyebrow. "So you weren't bullied?" The boy then shook his head, as he said, "No, not really. I was always kinda careless though." The hero didn't like where this was going, so he asked, "What do you mean, Midoriya?" The boy thought for a moment. "I mean that I was quirkless, so I was always getting into accidents, hurting myself, and causing inconveniences for my teachers and classmates." The boy looked down as he added, "But now it's all good." The hero then asked an important question, "Tell me, Midoriya." The hero looked him in the eye as he asked, "Did one Katsuki Bakugo ever bully you? Did he ever use his quirk on you with the intent of harming you?" The boy looked at him shocked, as if he just witnessed a murder occur right in front of him. "Of course not. Kachan is a great future hero, I just know it. He never bullied me. It was my fault for always being reckless." Setsuna then said, "Greenie, are you really sure that he didn't bully you? I mean, do you remember what happened in the cafeteria a couple of days back?" The boy then said as he scratched the back of his head nervously, "He wasn't bullying me. He was showing that he cares in his own way." The boy looked at his hands as he said, "He's my friend, and I know that he feels the same way. He's just a little bit angry with me, but he'll come around eventually." The girl wanted to talk further, but she saw the dog hero shake his head, telling her that she wasn't going to change his mind. The session continued with Hound Dog asking questions, and Izuku answering. Finally, the session ended and the two friends went to continue their day, as Hound Dog went to Nezu's office. In the office, Vlad and All Might sat with Nezu, who then asked, "So what is the diagnosis?" The dog hero then shook his head. The boy's mental health is in shambles, but it isn't to the degree that he poses a danger to others, though he mostly poses a threat to himself because he views his life as worthless compared to others as long as they're okay. Vlad, you might want to work on this issue. The dog hero then began to count a list of problems he thinks the boy suffers from. The boy, from basic observation, suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder, low self-esteem, sensitivity to loud noises, mild fear of people though his friends are lowering this, imposter syndrome, and finally a low case of Stockholm syndrome with Bakugo. All Might sat in horror as he digested the new information. Was his successor suffering so much under his nose, and he didn't even notice? Truly, he was a horrible mentor. Vlad, on the other hand, sighed. He still didn't know why Bakugo wasn't expelled. After Nezu unearthed the boy's true records from footage he got from his old school's servers, it was clear that the boy was a bully who attacked everyone and everything that he thought was looking down on him, whatever that meant. Hound Dog then added, "Honestly, at this point, I wouldn't be shocked if the boy thought about taking his own life away." This made All Might shiver, remembering the encounter between him and Izuku. If that day the boy killed himself, he was sure that he would never be able to have a wink of sleep ever again for his callous behavior that day. Simply, it was by far not his brightest moment. But don't worry, I have a plan to help the boy through them all. The dog hero announced. But first, I need him to open up to me, so it may take a while. The symbol of peace asked, "Why do you think that, Inu?" The dog hero then responded, "Because I think the boy to some extent doesn't trust in authority figures. He was bullied to no end in his school only for the facility to allow it or blame him for it. He might think that we're the same on some level." He then looked at Vlad saying, "It was a good thing you took him in your class, or else Aizawa's methods might have ruined whatever trust he had. And you managed to actually gain his trust. The boy speaks highly of you and All Might. Hell, he says that Vlad is the greatest teacher he ever had." Both Vlad and All Might sighed in relief knowing that the boy trusted them. The dog hero then said, "Here's my plan to help him recover from those horrible years." In the mall, Setsuna was dragging Izuku like a ragdoll around as she window shopped for items, causing the boy to groan. "Man, I hate when my mom does it. I think now I like it less." The girl then looked at him in mock betrayal as she said, "Well, Midoriya, it's not my problem. You men are like apes who only slap the nearest piece of clothes onto each other and call it a day. We have to work hard for it." The boy's sweat dropped at her line as he thought, "Man, she sure is funny when she's doing this, but she's still cute, what am I thinking?" The boy then slapped himself to get rid of those thoughts. Both teens then heard voices calling out for them. They looked behind them and saw that Kanoko and Tetsu have just arrived. The girl was wearing a frail red dress, while the boy was wearing a blue t-shirt with some white jeans. They stopped in front of them, and they greeted them, but Tetsu asked, "Hey, where's Kendo?" The girl in question then popped out of nowhere as she whispered into his ear, "You called for me." This caused the boy to shriek like a frightened girl, and jump away, as both Kendo and Setsuna laughed at his reaction. Setsuna then said, "Man, scaring you never gets old. I still remember when I first met you and caused my head to fall off. You actually passed out from fear. It was so hilarious." The boy sat on the ground crossing his legs as he drew circles on the ground, saying quietly, "This isn't manly." Izuku then sat beside him and patted him on the back, saying, "Don't feel bad about it, Tetsu. We all have embarrassing moments." The boy looked at him and nodded. He stood up from his position, and asked, "So what do you guys want to do? I'm so pumped right now. I can do anything." His friends smiled at his enthusiasm. They looked around, and the girls agreed that they needed to do some shopping against the boys' wishes, who were turned into human clothes rackets, lifting the clothes that the girls picked, earning sympathetic looks from men all around them. Izuku then asked the metal boy, "Is this what usually happens when guys hang out with girls?" "No, but I think the girls are doing it on purpose to annoy us," he said as Itsuka threw at him another jacket, adding them to the huge pile that he already had. He then looked at her asking, "Is this some joke? You already put about 20 jackets down there." The girl looked at him with a sad look as she said, can't I act like other girls? The boy then saw a tear slide down her face. He then quickly backpedaled saying, I didn't mean anything. She then threw at him another piece of clothing saying, then hold this and stop whining. We're about to finish. The boy blinked a little as he then understood what happened. He was doped. He then quietly said, that was so unmanly. Truly to Kendo's words, 5 minutes later, they were finished shopping, but this raised a new issue such as Izuku and Tetsu becoming their packing mules as they held the bags the girls had their clothes in. Tetsu then said, let us take a break for the love of all that's holy. Somewhere Abara felt very proud of one of her classmates. The girls then allowed the boys to take a breather, as Kanoko said, for tough guys who 2 days ago jumped down to help All Might fight a huge monster, you sure get winded out quickly. This made both boys glare in her direction, making her squeak and hide behind Kendo, who said, stop scaring her. She's joking with you. The boys then laughed saying, we know. We're joking too. Izuku added, now aside from doping us into becoming your personal packing mules, and most likely tricking us to come to your shopping spree, what do you girls want to do? The girls then thought for a moment. Truly, when this getaway was mentioned by Setsuna, it was mostly a shopping trip for them, and they brought the guys to hold their clothes. But now what else did they want to do? Kanoko then suggested, how about we watch some movies? It's been a while since I watched one. The guys nodded their heads, as so did the other girls, but Izuku then asked, so what genre do you want to watch? I can watch anything honestly. The other 4 then began to discuss between them what they wanted to do, but they couldn't reach a common ground. Each had their own opinion as they voiced it. Kendo was the first to talk, we should watch an adventure movie. I mean that way we get everything, a small amount of action, a good plot, a thrilling story, good characters, and it will be a blast. She then lifted her hand saying, anyone who agrees with me, raise your hand like me. She looked only to see the others didn't even react. She knew that Izuku didn't care what they picked since he only wanted to watch a movie, and this was most likely his first hangout with his friends, so he didn't want to push it. Kanoko shook her head saying, you don't know what you want, shroom. How about we all watch a romance movie? I heard that there was a new one, and it's so cool. The story revolves around a soldier who went to war only to come to find his love dead, but, she goes on about the movie, but when she finishes, she notices that nobody seemed interested, causing her to pout as she said, you will never find love if you can't like a story like that. Tetsu then said, we should totally watch an action movie. I mean all the cool fighting scenes, the manly themes, the cool stunts, and punches. It is clearly the best choice to see. He then looked around him, and see the other 3 not interested as they shrugged their shoulders, making the boy deflate as he said, today's just not my day. Setsuna then said, we should go to see a comedy, so we can get a good laugh or two. I mean come on, we barely escaped with our lives a couple of days ago, we should relax a bit, and a comedy movie should totally do the trick. She then dragged them to see a poster of a comedy movie. See, this is one of the best. My sister and I watched a while back, and we couldn't stop laughing. The other 3 didn't buy it and the others went back into arguing. Meanwhile, Izuku saw a poster of a horror movie and thought it has been a while since he had seen one. Somewhere Reiko felt proud of one of her classmates. The green-haired boy then said, how about we watch a horror movie? I mean it usually has everything from action, adventure, comedy, and a bit of romance. The others looked at him as they stopped arguing with each other, causing the boy to shrink on themselves as he said, that's at least what I think. There is no need to do as I tell you. He then looked away, beginning to feel embarrassed. The others then began to contemplate his words. Kendo then said, I think that should do. I mean it could be really cool. It's been a long time since I've seen one. Setsuna added, yeah, let's go see it, but I want to sit beside Greenie, so I can cuddle with him if I felt afraid. The girl said, making the boy blush heavily as she chuckled at his reactions. Truly, he was easy to tease. Kanoko then told them, a horror movie, that's really scary, but I think I can manage. I mean I'm going to be a hero, so a little movie can't scare me. Setsuna then detached her head and she sent it over to the girl as she said in her ears, boo, which caused the girl to jump in fright. Tetsu then pumped his fist into the air, as he said, horror is awesome. I'm so psyched, let's go. This was met by a dual smack by Setsuna and Itsuka, who told him, "Clam down, Tetsu. You're causing a scene." The boy looked around only to see that people were giving him weird looks, causing him to scratch the back of his head with a sheepish expression as he apologized. Itsuka then said, "Horror movie it is." She then pointed to the movie ticket booth saying, "Let's go buy some tickets then." They bought their tickets and some food to eat during the movie. They then entered the movie center and they sat in silence. Suddenly, the screen began to roll as it showed a movie about a young girl who was haunted by the ghost of her long-dead vengeful relative. This made Kendo say, "This is seriously going to be cheesy." Izuku agreed with her statement. A couple of minutes into the movie, both Izuku and Kendo were red-faced as their friends hang onto them from fright. To Kendo, she had Kanoko hugging and covering her face in her chest, which she could understand given that the girl was a little shy, so she could understand where she was coming from. The thing that she couldn't get is why the metal boy was hiding his face in her shoulder. She then mentally said, "Well, everyone is afraid of something, and it seems Tetsu is afraid of horror movies. I mean, it's not a bad thing. Even with superpowers, it's actually quite humanizing to think that we all have fear in our hearts." Izuku, on the other hand, had Setsuna hugging his chest tightly as she shivered in fear from the movie kills and jump scares. "I never took Tokage for someone to be afraid of a horror movie, but then again it's not wrong though." He then looked at her as she peeked from her hand and looked at the screen before shutting it quickly. "It's kinda cute that she's, no stop." When the movie finished, everyone scrolled out, but Tetsu was bummed out. He took Kendo to the side saying he needed to talk to her in private. Once they were alone, he looked at Kendo apologizing, "I'm sorry for the way I acted. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable." The girl smiled at him as she told him, "No problem, Tetsu. Every one of us has something that we're afraid of. There's nothing to be ashamed of, so don't apologize for what happened." The boy blushed a little as he remembered what happened. Why couldn't he be manly? He was then smacked on the head as Itsuka said, "Didn't I tell you it was okay?" The boy was startled as he realized that he said his thoughts accidentally out loud. Itsuka then shook her head saying, "Tetsu, it's truly okay to be afraid. And it's not like you froze in a fight against a villain. It's okay to have things to fear. This doesn't reduce your manliness, if anything it increases it, since even when you're afraid in a fight you push back your fear and keep going on." The boy looked at her as he cried crocodile tears saying, "That's so manly of you, Kendo." The girl chuckled, as she said, "Let's go back to our friends before they leave us here." The boy nodded his head as both then walked toward their friends. The 5 friends then talked a little before eating in a small shop and calling it a day, each going to his home before the sun began to set down. Tetsu and Kanoko went together to catch a train since they lived in the same area, while Kendo simply walked home since her home was close to the place where they ate. This left Setsuna and Izuku alone, so the girl decided to break the ice. "So Greenie, where do you live?" "I live in the Shizuoka area." The girl's eyes widened as she said, "Go out of town." "I live there too." She then scratched her head saying, "How come I never met you?" The boy's sweat dropped as he said, "It's not like it's a street or two." This made her feel embarrassed for asking such an obvious question. She then quickly asked, "What junior high did you go to?" "Aledra Middle School." The boy answered before adding, "What about you?" The girl cringed once the place's name was mentioned, since a few days ago, a hero raid was made against it, and it was shut down since it had a highly biased staff who treated people with strong quirks like some gods, while ones with weak quirks were treated like dirt. Shizuoka Middle School. The two then continued their small talk as they boarded the train, and went back to their home. Once they arrived, Izuku walked Setsuna to her home even though she refused. But the boy insisted, saying he just wanted to make sure she was safe given that the sun had already set down. Once she was in front of her house, she walked up the steps to the door. She then searched in her purse for her keys only to see that she forgot her keys inside the house. She quickly began to bang on the door hoping that her sister will open it. When she received no response, she checked her phone and saw a message from her sister saying, "Hi, Set, I'm sorry, but I had to go to my college since my teammates and I have a project, but we're facing some difficulties, so I had to go to meet them. I'll be back by tomorrow morning. Love, Hannah. By the way, Have fun with your boy toy, and I put some food in the microwave for you. The girl slid down the door groaning. Wonderful, her parents were at work and her sister was with her friends doing some research. Not that she can blame her sister. She knew that her sister worked hard to keep her company, but she can't exist in more than one place. And now Setsuna was staying outside her home. She had to admit that being alone in the night was quite scary since she didn't have any place to go right now. She didn't have enough money to sleep in a hotel, nor did she have any relatives in the city. Most of her relatives lived outside of it. Once, she almost gave up hope. She remembered that a certain green-haired classmate of hers lived in the same city as her. The girl then jumped and quickly ran, activating her quirk, hoping for two things. First, no one saw her using her quirk, and second, that Izuku didn't make it far away from her. She made it high in the sky and began to search for her green-haired counterpart. It didn't take long before she found a mop of green curly hair walking down the street, so she quickly went down to him. She called out to him, "Yo, Greenie, wait up." The boy looked back at her, shocked that she followed him, as he asked, "Tokage, what are you doing here? I thought you entered your house." The girl chuckled nervously as she explained, "You see, my parents are working overnight today, and my sister is working with her friends on some college project. And also I kinda forgot my keys inside the house, so there isn't anyone to open the door to me." The girl then began to move her foot along the ground, "So I was hoping if I can crash at your house just for tonight. My sister is coming back in the morning." The boy blushed heavily at the idea that a girl wanted to crash at his home and most possibly see his room, but right now his friend needed his help, so he said, "Of course, it would be wrong not to help you, Tokage." The girl smiled as she grabbed his hand, saying, "Let's go. I want to meet Midoriya." The boy blinked, but then he understood that she wanted to meet his mom. His brain then processed what she wanted, so he quickly followed, knowing that if she met his mother without him, his mother would flood the apartment complex thinking that Tokage was his girlfriend. The thought itself made him steam. He caught up with the girl, and told her, "Hold on. Do you know where my house is?" This caused the girl to stop dead in her tracks as she rubbed the back of her head, saying, "No." The boy then laughed a little as he told her to follow him. They walked for a couple of minutes before making it in front of an apartment complex. He walked up to the door and said to the girl, "Be calm, my mom can be a little bit over the top, so don't worry, okay?" The boy then knocked on the door only for it to fly open, as a small chubby woman opened it, crying out, "Izuku, my baby, are you okay? It's about 7 o'clock, and I was about to call the police to tell them that you were kidnapped." She then noticed the girl beside her son, who simply said, "Hi." It only took a few minutes before tears began to well in the woman's eyes, as Izuku then said, "Mom, calm down. It's not what you think." The woman didn't hear him as she cried, "My baby has a girlfriend." And with that, a geyser of tears flooded the apartment complex, shocking Setsuna. It took a couple of minutes before Inko managed to calm down when Izuku explained to his mother that the girl wasn't his girlfriend. Tokage then introduced herself, and said, "Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Setsuna Tokage, and I'm Greenie's classmate." She then bowed, saying, "It's a pleasure to meet you." The woman smiled at how the girl was polite as she then introduced herself, saying, "It's my pleasure to meet such a lovely young girl like yourself, Tokage. My name is Inko Midoriya, and I'm Izuku's mother. I only wish he brought his other friends here. He speaks highly of you all." Izuku then yelled, "Mom, don't go telling her that." This only confirmed what the girl heard as she smiled, knowing that now she had some teasing material for her friend. After that, they all entered the house, and the woman gave her some of Izuku's clothes when he was still thin and not fit, which made a perfect fit on her body. Inko then directed the girl toward the bathroom, telling her to be free if she wanted to have a bath. The girl bowed to the lady, as she entered the bathroom, and took a shower. After half an hour, the girl exited the bathroom, after she dried her hair, and dressed herself, feeling a bit self-conscious that she was wearing her classmates' clothes. She then turned around the corner and saw Izuku sitting with his mom, as she talked with him. She looked as she thought to herself, "So that's how it feels to have time with your mother." She then opened a bracelet showing a picture of a younger version of herself smiling with a woman who looked like an older version of herself, a man who had some scaly snake-like skin and a forked tongue going out of his mouth, and her sister. She then asked herself with a single tear running down her face, when was the last time did I spend time with my mother and dad? She shook her head wiping her tear, as she entered the room. When Inko saw her, she told the girl, "Come on, Tokage dear. We're going to have dinner, so you have to join us." The girl then sat down and joined the two in their dinner. The dinner went smoothly, as the two women talked with the older woman showing the younger open an album of Izuku making the boy go into panic mode, as he tried to stop his mom from embarrassing him. As the clock hit 10, the girl and the boy excused themselves to go to bed. But when the girl stood in front of the room, the boy gulped strongly as he opened the door, and a sight welcomed the girl that told her how much the boy liked All Might. It's kinda cute that he loves him so much. She then walked into it, and said, "Wow, you sure love All Might." The boy scratched the back of his head saying, "I just like him. I never said it's a wrong thing, though it still needs to have a touch of yourself." The girl then saw the boy pull a sleeping bag, and said, "Well, you can sleep on my bed, while I sleep in this bag." The girl shook her head at how considerate the boy was as she said, "You can sleep with me if you want." This made him go red as she smiled at him before going to bed and going to sleep. The boy then smiled softly, as he looked at her. He then snuggled into his sleeping bag. He took one last look at her, and saw how she was hugging the pillow while she slept, causing him to think, cute. And with that, he closed his eyes as he allowed sleep to claim him. Setsuna began to wake up as she felt rays of sunshine hit her face, causing her to roll in her bed as she said, "Come on, someone turns off the light, please. I want to sleep some more." The girl began to use the cover to hide her face to sleep a bit longer, before realizing that she wasn't in her home. She was in her friend's face, causing her to blush a little, and finally, she seriously needed to go home to prepare for another school day. The girl then adjusted herself to sit up in the bed to look around, but she noticed that Izuku wasn't in his sleeping bag. She then saw the door of the bathroom in Izuku's room open only for said boy to walk out with nothing but a towel on him. The girl's face then began to burn as heat raised to her cheeks before she quickly hid her face in the bed to avoid looking at her friend as she thought, "Damn, his school uniform doesn't do him any justice. He's hot under those loose clothes." The boy who just noticed the girl woke then jumped back into the bathroom closing the door, as he began reciting apologies from behind the wooden door saying, "I'm really sorry, Tokage. I didn't mean to look inappropriate in front of you, I just forgot that you're there. Please, don't think that I'm some kind of pervert." The boy kept going on with his apologies as the girl shook herself from shock. She then said, "Don't sweat it, Greenie. No harm was done, just be careful next time." The boy then exited the bathroom, but he was now wearing a shirt and some shorts before he looked at the girl with a blush on his face saying, "The bathroom is all yours now." The girl smiled at him as she said, "No thanks, Greenie, but I seriously should be going to my home now." She then looked at the clock, and saw it was about 7:05. She looked at Izuku saying, "I need to arrive on time so I can prepare myself for today. You know my school uniform is here." The girl then quickly grabbed her clothes from yesterday before slipping into the bathroom and putting them on. She walked outside only to see Izuku have quickly finished putting on his school uniform, but he was still working on the tie. She looked at him, and said, "So Greenie, what are doing now?" The boy looked at her and said, "Well, I'm going with you to your home, so we can go together to school. I mean we do live in the same area, so why not use the same train to go to UA?" The girl smiled as she said, "Thanks Greenie, but you should have breakfast with your mom. Don't take spending time with her for granted." The boy shook his head and said, "My mom already went to her work today. She has an early shift today, so I already finished breakfast for myself and you." The girl looked away as she coughed saying, "Thank you." The boy then handed her a homemade sandwich which she accepted. They both walked to the front of the door before Tokage grabbed his hand as she said, "Thanks for allowing me to stay at your house yesterday. I really mean it. Not a lot of people would feel comfortable doing it, especially if that person is someone you just met a couple of days ago." She finished as he twirled her hair with her finger causing Izuku to think, "Cute, stop it. I'm not some pervert," he thought with a blush on his face. The boy waved his hands quickly, "No, it's not a big deal really. I mean anyone would have done that. There's no need to thank me for anything." He finished scratching the back of his head with his hand. The girl looked at him before closing in, and saying, "Consider this your reward for saving me in the USJ, and allowing me to stay here yesterday." The boy blinked in confusion as he wondered what she was talking about before he felt two soft things press against his cheek. He barely made the image of Setsuna smiling at him, and his brain quickly processed the information as it said, "A girl just kissed me." The boy was just not able to handle it and passed out on the spot. The girl blinked in confusion, as she remembered that Izuku might have never had a girlfriend before, so maybe this was a bit too much for him to handle. She then shrugged as she hefted the boy over her shoulder and thought, "He's lighter than he looks." She began her walk to her home as she held Izuku, causing people to give them more than some weird looks, but other than that nothing happened. Once she arrived, she noticed that the boy began to wake up. She set him down in front of her yard and said, "Earth to Greenie, are you there?" The boy began to rub his head as he groaned, "What happened? My head feels like it's been hit by 1,000 hammers." The girl giggled at his reactions as she explained, "Well, I'd like to explain to you what happened, Greenie, but I need to keep it short and simple cause we're kinda on a tight schedule here. I kissed you on the cheek and you kinda freaked out, and passed out." The boy's face was now resembling a human strawberry from how red it was as the girl said, Now, no passing out on me now. I'll go in, and be out in a couple of minutes." She looked at his tie, and said, "Then perhaps I can work on that horrendous piece of work you call a tie." The boy looked at his tie, not understanding her point, thinking it was good enough. Setsuna ran quickly to her house. It was now 7:20. She was truly thankful that the trip on the train took about 10 minutes or both of them would be late. She began to knock on the door, wishing her sister was already home. Her prayers were answered by the door opened, not by her sister, but by her mother. The girl sighed in her head as she said, "Wonderful. Now, where's the interrogation music?" She tried to quickly run away to her room to ready herself, but her mom caught her saying, "Not so fast, young lady. Where do you think you're going? You have some explaining to do." The girl mentally sighed. This was something that she couldn't decide if she hated or loved about her parents. Even though they weren't around most of the time, they still protected her fiercely. That meant sometimes acting like helicopter parents, which she didn't need right now. She didn't know if this was their way of making it up for her for not being there, or if it was just them, but on some level, it didn't help her because she missed them so much. No protective attitude can replace their presence. She looked at her mom, and said, "Mom, look. We can talk about this later. I need to change my clothes, so I can go to school." The older woman didn't budge, so the younger one explained as quickly as possible, "I hang out with my friends yesterday, but when I came back I found out that I forgot my keys home, but my friend let me stay at his home." The woman then asked, "Was it Tetsu?" She found it hard to believe that the girl went all the way to Tetsu's home to stay the night over. Tokage took a deep breath, readying for a painful headache. "No, my friend's name is Izuku Midoriya. He's the one who allowed me to stay in his house. I found out that we live in the same area, and I asked him if I could stay, and he agreed." The woman's eyes widened as she asked her daughter, "Did harm you in any way or form?" The girl looked at her mother with anger as she said, with venom lacing her words, "No, and don't talk about him like that. He's in the hero course like me." She was cut off as her mother said, "Sweetie, a lot of people enter the hero course only to have girls flock around them, and I'm also worried since what happened in the USJ." The girl sighed as she said quietly, deciding to let the very disrespectful remark about her friend slip away, "If you were so worried, why didn't you come on the same day? Honestly, sometimes you make me feel that you don't care at all." The girl's remark didn't go unnoticed as her mother said, "Sweetie, we do care, but we were busy with work, we didn't have time." The girl's eyes flinched as she looked at her watch. 7:30, wonderful. She sighed as she had this conversation with her parent 100 times, but they won't budge. She walked to her room only to see her sister smiling at her. It was a half-understanding smile, and a half, "I know that you did something," smile that made her blush. The girl quickly changed as she went to her still-waiting friend, and took him to go to the station to reach Ua in time as she fixed his tie, much to the boy's chagrin. Her mother looked from the window, and looked at the boy as she said, "I hope he isn't a bad influence on her because he seems like one." The other Tokage woman shook her head with disbelief at her mother. She was dismissing the boy without even knowing anything about him. She then shrugged, remembering when they first met Tetsu. They made the boy go through hell, and back then they were only 10. She loved her parents dearly, but she couldn't help but agree with her sister that her parents always oversell it with the whole, "we're working to provide a better future" shtick. She knew where they were coming from, but accompanied by the overbearing attitude, it becomes annoying. She still hated the fact that her dad almost drove away her boyfriend with his protective dad routine. Back in UA, every member of the UA staff was sitting waiting for All Might's detective friend to arrive, but they were also talking about what happened back in the USJ, since this wasn't some kind of a random attack that anyone can pull off. Currently, in the conference room, there were the primary teachers who were Midnight, a heavily bandaged Aizawa, Present Mike, Vlad King, Hound Dog, Snipe, 13, Ectoplasm, Smintos, All Might, and Nezu. Midnight said, "This isn't a normal attack of some guy who was trying to achieve the impossible by killing All Might, but this was a well-planned attack against us." Her usual provocative demeanor was gone and was replaced by a more serious one as she explained her point of view. "Agreed," Snipe the cowboy-themed hero said. "They also chose the USJ for its isolation to initiate the attack, since it would take a long time for us to reach. That was if we managed to sense something that is." He finished explaining. Hound Dog added, "I think the only reason their plan failed was due to the children acting quickly and decisively against them. Add to that the unintentional addition of Class 1B to the mix kinda changed the balance of things toward our side." He then looked at both homeroom teachers and said, "Please inform both of your classes that I will have every one of them going to an obligatory counseling session to see if the attack scared anyone." While Vlad agreed with the dog hero, Aizawa silently scoffed as he mentally said, "If a small villain attack scared them, they shouldn't be in the hero course, to begin with. Plus, the experience should toughen them up. We should count our blessings though," Smintos said, making everyone look at him. "I mean, the media thinks that only Class 1A was caught in the villain attack, but they don't know about Class 1B. If they did, that would have been a bad thing on our end that both hero classes got caught in the crossfire." Nezu nodded as he said, "We are only thankful that they didn't, or it was going to be a media fiasco." He then sighed as he said, "This could be avoided given the sign early that day." The Rat Man said, referring to the media breaking into the school earlier that day. The doors to the conference room then opened, revealing Tsukauchi, who walked into the room, greeted everyone before he brought a projector, and began his presentation as he said, "First off, let's begin with the obvious that this wasn't some normal attack. This attack, according to the people we arrested, was something that was being planned for weeks on end, and what happened regarding the media could have been only a distraction to allow someone to sneak inside the school to steal the schedule of the students to launch the attack." The man then flipped to different slides showing different villains, till Aizawa said, "That's quite the number of villains that you have there. Don't tell me that the blue-haired man-child was able to recruit them." The detective nodded his head saying, "Unfortunately, that's what happened. All those villains you see are nothing but small-time crooks that had nothing to do with villainy other than robbing a purse, or the occasional assault, but somehow that guy managed to convince all of them to come with him to USJ to kill All Might. All of them said that Shigaraki promised them that they will be the soldiers of a new world order with the death of All Might. This caused several of them to scratch their heads in confusion as they wondered how someone like Shigaraki managed to bring together around 1,000 villains and send them to the USJ. Do you have any leads on him or that missed villain Kurogiri, I presume?" All Might said. The detective shook his head as he said, "Sadly, the missed villain seems that he has no existence whatsoever in any web, station, or document. We also didn't find anything on Shigaraki as he calls himself. We tried to search for someone who has some type of disintegration quirk on him, but we couldn't locate anything. It's like both of them appeared out of the blue. Do we have anything else on that Shigaraki guy, other than the fact that he has a disintegration quirk?" Snipe said as he crossed his arms. "Sadly, all we know is that he also has a childish personality. For example, according to one student, Izuku Midoriya, when he punched him, the villain began to roll on the ground, saying that the boy shouldn't be able to punch him since he was, as Izuku said, an NPC. This caused Vlad to message his head saying, 'Wonderful, what are you saying? That we have a villain with a seriously strong quirk who has the temper of a 3-year-old. The blood hero looked at the detective to tell him that his conclusion was wrong, but sadly he only nodded. The blood hero sighed as he said, that only increases his danger factor by 100. Someone like him is a danger to society since he's more likely to destroy everything in sight because he doesn't like it. Other teachers nodded their heads. 13, who was silent from the beginning, then said, okay, then do we have information on that black monstrosity that accompanied them? The detective nodded his head as he popped up another picture of a man, causing the space hero to question him, and asked, who is that? That, ladies and gentlemen, is the monster known as Nomu that All Might fought. Everyone was shocked that this thing was the Nomu since the thing was as massive as they get, and this guy was a string bean at best. Everyone stared at the screen for a couple of moments before Vlad spoke up, and said, that's impossible. I mean, look at him. This guy is nothing like that thing my students described to me when they got back from the USJ. I mean, it's not possible. Well, sadly, this is the truth. The projector then displayed a shot of the Nomu being arrested. Our officers found this thing in some random field with children literally playing with it. It was taking orders from them as if it was a puppet. When we asked the children to hand it over, and they obliged, the thing came with us, no questions asked. It was like moving a sack of mussels. Well, that's reassuring, Snipe said sarcastically. It's nice to know that even monsters appreciate spending quality time with kids. This little remark of his caused the other teachers to look at him with raised eyebrows, so he coughed into his hand and asked, so, the real question here, is why did it come silently with you after the huge show it gave us in the USJ? Aizawa threw his bandages then said, maybe, it was programmed to talk orders from that Shigaraki guy, and when he wasn't in the picture anymore, it left a void for anyone to fill it up, and it seems the children were the ones who did it. The other teachers nodded their heads approving of the theory since it was the only acceptable thing at the time. Tsukauchi then added, this is correct. We were able to confirm that from varying tests on that thing that it responds to orders given to it, but cannot do anything otherwise, and it will only stay still like a statue. It then showed an interrogation video with Nomu, but the thing didn't say anything at all. It seemed like it had its eyes glazed over, and was looking at an empty void. And as you can see, when we tried to interrogate the thing, it didn't respond. It only stared at us dumbly without even making a simple word or sound. Quote, the teachers nodded their heads, as Midnight spoke, perhaps, they destroyed all of its mental capabilities to make it the perfect killing machine. The teachers agreed with her statement as Hound Dog added, pretty logical. Even petty criminals like this guy have some consciousness deep in there. A monster with no logical capabilities would be able to do their betting without the slightest bit of hesitation. Indeed, we did all kinds of mental tests on that thing, but it doesn't even have a child's mental capabilities. The detective said as he went to another screen, we also made some tests on his DNA. He scratched the back of his head and carried on, well, you can see that the results speak for themselves. No need for further explanations. The teachers were flabbergasted at the form of his DNA, as 13 said, I honestly don't think that chromosomes should look that way. Our DNA should be that messed up. It looks like a bunch of different people's DNA was put into one capsule, and the result was this monster. The detective smiled as he said, that's what I also think. I believe that the League of Villains experimented on people causing their DNA to mutate to this extent. Vlad King then interjected, but what kind of experiments would cause somebody's DNA to mutate to this extreme? It seems as if his body was ripped apart, and then reattached on the subcellular level. The detective then continued, actually, I was going to reach that point. You see, through the many experiments that the labs did on that thing's DNA, we were able to reach a solid conclusion that the thing did indeed have multiple quirks, as the hand villain said. The screen then showed multiple photos of some random crooks, civilians, and even 2 heroes who went missing a while back. We were able to confirm through hard work that the Nomu's DNA contains at least traces of every one of those individuals in it. Present Mike then said, so are you basically saying that every one of those people was in some kind of huge science experiment? The detective nodded, that's seriously sick. Aizawa then said, whether that's sick or not, in essence, it's not our concern. The thing that is our concern is that there's a bunch of well-equipped villains that are playing scientists producing monsters with multiple quirks. Multiple quirks? Hound Dog asked. The detective answered him saying, True enough, the Nomu did have multiple quirks on it. Snipe then countered, but that's impossible, isn't it? He then explained further, I mean I heard of people with 2 quirks. Hell, I even heard of people with 3 quirks at most, but multiple that sounds out of the realm of fiction, or out of that old bedtime story about the quirk boogeyman. This caused Nezu, All Might, and the detective to flinch, but no one noticed. Nezu then said for the first time from the beginning of the presentation, whether that's true or not, we must be ready to face further challenges, especially if these people are still out there, and are threatening the safety of our students. Principal Nezu is right. These villains attacked our home turf in an attempt to kill our students, so whether they have the ability to grant multiple quirks or not, is not our primary concern. What we should focus on is finding them, and ending their threat before it begins, or escalates even further. All Might said, with the others agreeing with him, but at the same time, we must work our hardest to prevent them from attacking our students like what happened at the USJ. The detective then bowed, and said, thank you for your time. I will be taking my leave now, the man said as he walked to the door and exited it. Once he was out, Nezu said, all right, let's move to our second objective on the agenda today. The heroes looked at him as he said, the sports festival. Before anyone could speak, Vlad stood up and said, absolutely not. After what happened at the USJ, I honestly think we should cancel this year's sports festival. It's for the best. We should focus more than ever on protecting our students, not putting them in further danger. Aizawa then added, he's right, you know. Think about it. After this villain's attack, everyone's eyes will be focused on our students, so we should cancel it. He then took a breath as he carried on, if we continue with the festival, it will be like telling the whole villain community to come and see what our students can do. All Might understood where Aizawa was coming from, but at the same time he wanted his pupil to use the sports festival as a way to tell the world that he is here, so he said, but Aizawa, think about the opportunities that our students will miss if the sports festival isn't carried on. The hero was cut off by midnight, but we have the local agencies that are in UA's system. The heroine now had everyone's eyes on her as she continued, that way our students can have their internships without it being disrupted. Powerloader was next as he said, as much as I hate to say, I agree with Nezu. The sports festival must be carried on. Although we have many support companies on UA's website, none of them have quite the prestige that would help my students if they had an internship in them. Present Mike then gave his piece, I don't want it to be cancelled. It will be taken as a sign of weakness, and even encourage the villains to become bolder in the future. I say the festival must carry on without any hitch. He then took a sheepish expression as he said, and what can I say, I like to be the commentator. The heroes then continued to argue among themselves about whether the festival should be carried on or not, but finally, Nezu put an end to it as he coughed into his paw saying, it would appear that we came into an impasse where a part of our staff want it to be held, while a part doesn't. He then said cheerfully, how about we have a vote to settle things? The heroes agreed to the idea, as midnight passed to each one a piece of paper and a pen. Everyone wrote their vote, and they were given to Nezu to count the votes. In the end, there were 4 votes against carrying on the festival, which included Vlad, Eraser, Hound Dog, and Midnight, while there were 5 votes to carry it on Nezu, All Might, Power Loader, Ectoplasm, and Present Mike. The others abstained from voting. Nezu then clapped his hand saying, well, it's official then. The sports festival will be carried on like usual, but to help lessen the worries of our teachers, extra security will be put to make sure that nothing wrong happens. He then pointed toward the doors saying, now, you all have classes, and I have some paperwork to finish, so please leave. And with that, the meeting was called to an end as the teachers left for their respective classes. Back in Class 1B, one thought was strong as Tetsu voiced it, why the heck aren't we mentioned by the news? I mean, we also fought villains, and fought for our lives. The boy then slumped to the ground as Kendo began to pat his back, understanding his frustration, so she said, it seems that the media thinks that only Class 1A was caught in the attack, so our class wasn't mentioned in the news. The door then was burst open by Setsuna, who was holding a dazed Izuku with her as she said, see Greenie, I told you we'd make it on time. The boy then began to talk incoherently as he fell to the ground dizzy from being carried around like a ragdoll. Setsuna laughed at him, as she said, pleasure doing business with you. Don't ever be shy around me. Kuwaro came and gave Izuku a hand as Izuku said, "Thank you Kuwaro for helping me." The black-skinned boy replied, "No problem, but she sure sounds like a handful." Izuku laughed a little as he said, "I know, but I like her this way." The boy blinked a little, before saying, "Ah, sure I got you." In the end, opposites do attract each other. It's such a wonderful story about the Prince of the Forgotten finding love with a high-class girl. Izuku's face went nuclear red as he said, "I didn't mean like that. We're just friends. We're not dating." The boy then began to poke his fingers against each other as the black-skinned boy said, "Sure, whatever helps you sleep at night." On the side, Setsuna laughed at the boy, but she couldn't help but feel a little bit hurt when he said that they weren't dating and that they don't love each other. She shrugged it off as she looked at her target, and it was Komori. She quickly walked to the girl's side and gave her a smile that unsettled the shorter girl, so she asked, "Hey Setsuna, what are smiling about like that?" Setsuna continued to smile as she said, "Nothing really, but a little birdie told me that you hanged on our Prince of Darkness's chest when you got hurt in the USJ," she said, reminding the mushroom girl about something causing her to blush as she asked with a smile, "So tell me now, was the rumor true?" As the mushroom girl stuttered to answer, the doors of the room were opened, and Vlad King walked in much to her relief as he shouted, "Everyone, get to your seats, so we can begin the day." When everyone was settled, Vlad then spoke, "Well, I have 3 important things I need to tell you today, but before that, everyone was shocked when the huge man bowed. I apologize for you getting caught in the crossfire of the USJ, and failing my duty as your teacher." Kendo then said, "Please Vlad Sensei, don't do this. You couldn't know that this was going to happen." The huge man sighed as he said, "As much as that is true, I'm still sorry that you were forced to go through such a dramatic experience throughout your first week here, so that brings us to our first thing, which is that Hound Dog ordered all of you to go to meet him after the day ends to make a mental review about you after the USJ." The students nodded their heads as they knew that some people might have nightmares about it, and needed someone to who they can talk to about the events that happened yesterday. Now regarding the second thing, today all of you are going to have your rescue training. This caused multiple whispers to arise as Vlad said, "All your worries are accounted for, but I can assure you that everything is set and ready, and the facility will connect us every couple of minutes to see if there is any trouble." The students calmed as they seemed to accept his explanation. Finally, the most important news is that the sports festival will be in 2 weeks, so I want you all to be training as hard as you can. Silence filled the air as Vlad expected his students to protest, but he was not expecting them to do this. Suddenly multiple hands were raised to the air as Vlad mentally said, "That's close to the reaction I expected." He then pointed to the silent girl of Class 1B Yui who spoke, "Sensei, I know that the sports festival is an important way to get noticed by pros, but don't you think that it will be a little reckless if we did this after a villain attack like last week?" The hero nodded his head as he said, "I understand all of your concerns, and I voiced them to the board, but alas they thought that if we cancelled the sports festival we would be giving the villains a free victory over us." The man sighed and then added, "So it will be carried on as usual, but of course, the security of the event will be tighter than usual with multiple pros being present around to prevent any villain from thinking to come to the stadium in a 100-mile radius." The students nodded their heads at their teacher. The man then ruffled his hair as he said, "All right kids, I want you all to go now and get into your hero clothes so we can move to the USJ to begin your rescue training. You all got 3 minutes." And with that, everyone was gone to change their clothes. When they were finished, both Itsuka and Izuku ushered them to the bus and told them to hold tight till they reached the training area. The trip was mostly uneventful as most of the time was spent with the students talking to each other, though Setsuna was looking for blackmail material against Kanoko, suspecting that the mushroom girl secretly has a crush on their resident emo boy. The most eventful thing was Toguro being compared to Bakugo and the boy losing his top before being told to commit by Vlad. Once they reached the training grounds, everyone looked a little bit blue remembering the ordeal that they went through last week, but suddenly the gates of the USJ were blown open, and out of them came All Might. "Ha ha ha, hello there. Young heroes, you are going to learn to use your powers and quirks to save people." The hero noticed the uneasy looks and smiled sympathetically at them. They hadn't been at school for 1 week, and suddenly they were being forced to fight for their lives. No one, especially kids, should be put through what they had been put through. The hero carried on. Listen, young heroes, today I am here, so there is no need to worry, and I promise you that if anyone tries to attack you, they'll be knocked out before they even know it. The children then began to cheer All Might on, as 13, who was alongside the hero, snickered for the end when she knows All Might will turn into nothing more than a harmless kitten for their guest of honor. 13 then stepped up as she said, "All right kids, before we begin I would like to apologize for what happened last week. You are all still children, and shouldn't have been caught in the crossfire." The hero bowed, but then stood up again as she continued, "But now, it's time for the rescue training, so get ready to see how your quirks will help you in any of the environments present here." They all entered the plaza half expecting to see that the place was still in ruins from the previous week, but were shocked when they found that it was mostly fixed, causing Rin to say, "Wow, they work fast here. I thought we're going to work in the ruins everywhere." He then scratched his ponytail saying, "Guess, I was wrong." 13 then said, "Indeed, since hero courses are usually on tight schedules, construction work began on the USJ, the moment the students left." She then looked at the young heroes and said, "Before we begin, I need to remind you of a couple of things regarding quirks." She then went on to explain how although her quirk is being used to help people, it can be also used to hurt them. She also explained that during rescue work, the people responsible for saving people must be very careful of their surroundings with their quirks, since disturbing the surrounding may cause disasters. The hero smiled at them as she said, "All right, now that we put the safety instructions behind us, we can now begin with the actual training." She then added, "And for that, you have been all divided into groups of 5 based on your quirks." She then began calling out names: Team Alpha, Tokage, Shiozaki, Bondo, Midoriya, and Rin. The 5 looked at her as she said, "You 5 will go to the zone of ruins at first." She then flipped her notebook as the students nodded their heads and began to walk to the mentioned zone, and said, "Honanuki, Kamakiri, Kendo, Kuwaro, and Awase. Your group is called Beta, and you'll first report to the fire zone." The group of 5 nodded their heads and took off to the mentioned place. She then said the third team's name. Group Delta will consist of Komori, Tsunotori, Kaibara, Manga, and Yanagi. You'll all head toward the flood zone. The students bowed and walked away. As she read the last group, Group Sigma heads up, Kodai, Tetsu, Saburaba, Shishida, and Shota. All of you go to the earthquake zone. The mentioned teens bowed before going away. The space hero then looked at Vlad and All Might and said, "Poor kids, they don't know what's coming to them." She then noticed both Vlad and All Might shivering. "Come on, don't tell me you're still afraid of him." The number hero was quivering like a leaf in the wind, while Vlad was taking deep breaths to calm himself down. "Chickens." The space hero scoffed as she went to the monitoring room. She understood All Might, but Vlad only met him this morning, why he was so afraid of him. Little did she know that the blood hero in his first year in Shiketsu interned with him, and he feared the man ever since. Both male heroes then said to each other, "She doesn't know of his horror, so we won't blame her for her ignorance." Back with Izuku, he and the others in his group were now in the zone of ruins as Izuku said, "All right guys, it's planning time. We can't walk in blindly to help people, we must have some kind of plan. So before we start, let's each of us state what their quirk can do in a crisis." He wanted the dice to start rolling, so he said, "Honestly, mine could come in handy in Ruins Zone, Mountain Zone, or any other zone that requires physical effort or lifting. However, it's sadly no good in any water zone, the best I can do is swim there." Setsuna then said, "Well, mine could be useful for scouting areas for victims or survivors. I can also make use of it by adding an extra hand. I can also fly, so that could be helpful when dealing with people in water zones or mountain zones." Abara then said, "Well, mine could be used for medical purposes since I can dull my thorns. They can be also used to lift heavy weights, however, if the heat gets extreme, I will lose all of my power sadly." Rin began to explain what he can do. "Sadly, I'm not versatile as you guys. The most my scales can serve me is resistance to fire, but other than that I'm quite useless." Tokage then patted him on the back saying, "Don't sweat dude, this is something that you can't help with." Bondo then said, "Well, I think my quirk is strong enough to put out flames and hold debris together, but other than that I don't think I can do much honestly. Okay. Then let me put a plan. Izuku said as he took the lead of the situation, but he was cut out of his thoughts by Tokage saying, and who died and made you our leader? Who says that I don't want to put a plan myself? The boy then began to panic, afraid that he hurt his friend's feelings, but the girl laughed a little as she thought to herself, you know he looks cute when he's, okay, get yourself together girl, you're not some middle school grader who has a crush. She looked at him before saying, clam down Greenie, I was joking. She was then whacked over the head by Ibara, so she asked, what the heck? This is no time for joking, the girl replied bluntly, causing Setsuna to pout and say, you're a mean cinnamon roll. This made the Vine girl blush, as everyone has been calling her and Izuku that from the beginning of the year. The boy then shook his head, as he said, okay then, I have a plan. I want Tokage to be our eyes in the sky, she will alert us to any person stuck in the rumble. The girl replied by giving him 2 thumbs up, Rin will act here as a paramedic. He then looked at the boy before clasping his hands in a silent apology, but the boy waved his hand telling him it was not a big deal. I want Shiozaki and Bondo to come with me since Shiozaki's vines are good for lifting rumble and Bondo can use his quirk to stabilize broken slabs. The gentle giant and the angel girl of 1B then nodded their heads in approval. Not a moment passed, as the speakers then blurred into life, as 13's voice came through, as she said, all right hopeful heroes. Let's begin the rescue training begin. She then took a more official voice saying, heroes, a disaster has occurred in Tokyo which left the city in ruins. You have to quickly go there to save the survivors. The students then thought, she's taking this way too seriously. 13 then began to explain the rules. First off, there are 15 robots scattered around the zone of ruins. You have to find all of them in about 20 minutes or else they'll die from their injuries. Now make sure that you act as a team, split the work between you, and assign roles so you won't interfere with each other's jobs. The speakers then buzzed an alarm as 13 said, and begin. The team of 5 then divided as Rin stayed in the area labeled as a medic to wait for the others to bring the injured to him. Meanwhile, Tokage divided her body into pieces as she floated above her friends saying, all right, every time I find something, I'll send a piece of me to direct you. The lizard girl then took to the sky, as she began to look through the area for injured people. The girl's eyes were scanning everywhere till she saw something shining, so she yelled, Ibara, there's somebody on your right, go free him. The Vine girl then walked toward an area where she saw a metal dummy pinned under some rumble. She checked the surroundings and saw that it was connected to nothing, so she lifted the rumble with her hair and held the dummy, leading it back to Rin, all the while giving words of reassurance. Tokage then looked again and saw something. She went down to Izuku's level, and told him, follow me. The boy quickly ran behind the floating mouth. When they arrived at their destination, Izuku saw a dummy pinned under a car. The boy nodded and quickly activated his quirk, lifting the car, and pushing it away from the dummy. The boy then held the dummy bride style before running toward the medic's tent and putting it there, where Rin was simply applying some of Shiozaki's vines as a treatment to those who were injured. The boy mentally sighed as he heard the programmed message on the dummy say that it twisted its ankle. Tokage once finished informing Izuku and then went back to scouting, when she found something beside Bondo. She then went to the gentle giant, and told him, Bondo, this caused the poor boy to get startled and almost drop a dummy he was lifting. The boy then took a deep breath of relief before saying, what I can help you with, Tokage? The girl laughed as she said, throw some glue over these cracks. The giant shrugged as he did as he was told. The girl then sent her hands and moved a dummy from under some slabs. Bondo then understood that if she was to remove the dummy, the slabs might have collapsed, but by having the slabs glued, they remained still. This retinue continued for about 15 minutes, till finally they had one robot to find, but weren't able to. Tokage, seeing that her classmates needed her help, then sent her eyes to the ground as she searched the entire area quickly, before finally finding the final robot. The mentioned dummy was under rumble and also had 2 giant slabs above him that collapsed. Shiozaki walked up to the scene with Izuku, Bondo, and Setsuna. The Vine girl then tried to lift the rumble and the slabs, but Izuku quickly yelled, Shiozaki, stop. The girl, startled, stopped her vines as she asked, is there something wrong, Midoriya? The boy then pointed toward the slabs saying, "The slabs are cracked, if you tried to lift them they would have broken and killed the dummy. Also, they are connected to some fallen buildings, so they might cave in." The girl looked and nodded her head thanking her classmate. Tokage then said, "I have an idea." The others looked at her and approached as she began to tell her plan. Moments later, everyone was in their assigned positions. Bondo first went and threw some of his glue on the slabs to seal the cracks and strengthen them. Second, Shiozaki went into and threw her vines against the slabs holding them while also putting a barrier of vines to hold any falling debris in case of a cave down. Once Shiozaki's part was done, Izuku went into the place where the dummy was present and readied himself to dig once the vine girl lifted the slabs. Tokage then said, "Go," and with that, the vine girl with one move was able to move the slabs from the dummy, freeing it as Izuku began to dig through the debris, and the debris he dug to support both slabs when he left. The boy finally finished, so he said, "Now, Tokage." The lizard girl then sent her arms and grabbed the dummy and dragged it from under the slabs as Izuku ran out. Abara then let her hair down. They waited for a few moments, but nothing happened, so they breathed a sigh of relief. Once they returned the final dummy, a buzzer sounded signaling the end of the exam. 13 then sounded over the speaker telling them that they did a great job, and just like the combat training there was an MVP. Against all odds, it was Rin, because he acknowledged his abilities in this situation and opted to stay out of the way. 13 then told them to move to the next area, which was the flood zone. In the flood zone, it was mostly Setsuna and Abara since Izuku's super strength, Bondo's glue, and Rin's scales could hardly do anything. In the end, it was decided that Tokage was the star of the show here since she was the one that pointed Abara to all the dummies. Following that was the fire zone, in which Rin was able to contribute, but Abara was out since her vines had a weakness to fire. In the end, Izuku was the MVP for his careful planning and using his flicks to snuff out some of the bigger flames to allow Bondo to work. After that came the mountain zone. It's the area where Shiozaki truly shined as her vines here were used for everything. In the end, everyone did fine on their team with Izuku and Setsuna tying for MVP twice while the others had it one time. When they went back to the plaza, they were greeted by their friends as Tetsu said, "Man, that was easy." He was then yelled at by Saburaba saying, "Says the guy that almost caused an avalanche in the snowstorm zone." The metal boy then bowed down as he looked around and said, "So, we're finished kinda early today." Izuku and Kendo agreed with the latter saying, "It's quite pleasant to have some time for us for a change." Izuku then looked and saw something moving in the corner of his eyes toward Tetsu, so he activated his quirk and tackled the boy to the ground before a figure slammed into where the boy was standing moments ago, shocking all the students. Pony then said, "Attack again." The students then quickly activated all of their quirks as Rin said, "Didn't All Might say that he's going to deal with anyone that enters the USJ?" The boy for all his trouble then got slammed in the back of his head, going first into the ground before getting up and grumbling, "Sneaky prick." An old voice then was heard, "Sorry kid, but I already have taken care of All Might and your teachers." This earned multiple gasps as everyone was shocked that All Might was defeated. "So tell me, young heroes, what are you going to do?" The sounds of knuckles being cracked then echoed throughout the USJ. Izuku then said, "We're going to defeat you no matter who you are. Only for Toguro to add to that, so get ready to get a one-way ticket to hell." And with that everyone readied themselves to fight. They looked at the figure, or at least his blur, since he was jumping from one place to another with no one able to see him. At first, the figure said, "Let's get rid of the capture specialists, shall we?" The man then bounced around before slamming Bondo in the gut, causing him to fall over. He then went to Abara, who set a wall of vines, but suddenly he was beside her saying, "Nice trick, sweetie, but you didn't take advantage of me being distracted to catch me." He finished slamming into the religious girl's stomach, causing her to fall. The man then noticed a bunch of small rocks attacking him, with some of them enlarging. He looked and saw Yui and Reiko working together. He dodged all of the attacks and kicked them in the face, sending them to the ground, saying, "Next time do it from somewhere I can't see you in it." He then saw both Shishida and Tetsu attack him, but he dodged them both before giving them the same treatment as Yui and Yanagi. This was followed by him taking out Shota and Manga simultaneously. He then attacked Kanoko only for a hand to appear from the ground to try and grab him, but he yanked the owner of the hand into the air before sending him to the ground with a kick and trying to enact the same fate upon Konoko, but failed when a giant hand intercepted him, sending him flying away, but not before balancing himself and taking out Rin with a kick to the face. Right now, of the 20 students, there were only 10 standing. Make that 6, since in a moment he took out Pony, Awase, Kaibara, and Saburaba. The remaining 6 consisted of Izuku, Itsuka, Setsuna, Toguru, Konoko, and Honanuki. They all protected each other's backs as they tried to stop the intruder. Izuku then said, "Guys, do any of you have a plan?" Honanuki then chuckled, "It's usually you with the plans." Everyone gave him a dry look, making him feel nervous as he laughed. Toguru said, "I have something in mind." He then began to whisper his plan. The assailant looked at the students and he was shocked when they all dispersed, so he quickly went to the easiest target, which was Konoko. Given how dangerous she was, he should have taken her out first, a rookie mistake on his end. The moment he got close to her, a hand shot from the ground trying to catch, causing him to swerve a little, but then he was attacked from both sides by a fist and a blade. He quickly ducked, but his attackers stopped before they slammed into each other. They looked at him and smiled. He honestly laughed. Did they think the same trick can be used twice? With not much surprise, Kendo jumped from behind him with Honanuki emerging, trying to catch him, only for both of them to be knocked down for all their trouble. A disembodied hand tried to grab him, but he caught it and threw it back to its source before following it and kicking the splitting girl. He then went and made fast work of the final 3 and said, "This was horrible. In my life as a teacher, I have never seen something so horrible." He then looked at the dazed form of Izuku and Toguru, and the latter asked, "Who are you?" Izuku then looked at the man. He seemed like an old short man with a white beard. He was wearing a hero costume with his shoes having some kind of holes in them. The man answered, "The name's Gran Torino. Learn it and fear it, 'cause I'm going to be your judge, jury, and executioner till the sports festival." Izuku's eyes widened as he knew this was All Might's teacher. The old man then yelled, "Khan, All Might, what do you call this abomination of a performance?" Both men then appeared with their heads down, and the old man scolded them, with All Might shivering in fear in front of him, making the students wonder, who in the world is this guy to make All Might afraid of him so much? All Might then stepped forward, and said, Students, I would like to introduce you to my teacher, G. Gran Torino. He will be helping in your training F for the Sports F Festival." He then walked to the plaza's door saying, "Have a good day." All the students were shocked that All Might's previous teacher will be the one helping them, and at how much All Might is scared of him to the extent of running away. They then heard him say, "Khan, I'm going to put those jokers into shape. Bring me that list of their quirks that you told me about." They then saw their teacher salute the man, and walk away with 13, chuckling at both him and All Might. Torino then looked at the students who just got up. "Welcome to hell, kiddos. Try to survive." A thought echoed through everyone's mind, especially Izuku. What the hell kind of monster did I sign up with? Pain, and extreme pain at that, was the feeling that every member of Class 1B was experiencing from their lovely encounter with Gran Torino. Everyone was moving around like zombies, with some students hoisting others, such as Shishida lifting Fukudashi, Rin holding Saburaba, and Kuwaro carrying Konoko, much to the girl's embarrassment. Today was absolute hell. The students of Class 1B can testify to that, given that each one of them went through his own personal hell to increase his abilities under the watchful eye of Torino, or rather under his painful boot. Each student was doing something. Kendo was sparring with Tetsu, both aiming to increase the duration of their quirks, but with Kendo, Torino gave her instructions to try to spar and increase the time limit on her strength factor. Konoko was forced to grow mushrooms and extend her normal range as much as she can while researching new formulas to put in said mushrooms. Setsuna was forced to divide her body as much as possible and spar with Abara, whose job was to multitask with her vines and use them for several things at once and increase their strength. Awase was forced to wield a bridge across the entire flood zone, and every time he was forced to disassemble it since it didn't meet Torino's standards. Kaibara was sent to the mountain zone, where he was forced to drill a hole into the ground with his entire body moving at once till he reached the bottom of the zone, and he wasn't supposed to stop even if he felt dizzy. Pony was forced to keep launching her horns, and trying to control more than 4 at once, while Yanagi was against her trying to use her quirk to stop said horns, and increase her weight limit. Kodai was forced to enlarge things to their max size, or till the point where her quirk allowed it, whereas Hononuki was supposed to soften the enlarged objects. Kuwaro's training included entering dark objects and trying to move in them. Manga was simpler. It included reading manga to increase his arsenal of words, but the problem was he was supposed to do it in different languages. Kamakiri was sent to the mountain where he was popping blades out of his body and attacking the rocks with them, and then he was positioned to face Rin, who was working on increasing the durability of his scales. Saburaba's training was taking deep gulps of breath before expelling them to increase his lung capacity. Shishida was a tricky one, but he was eventually put with Kendo and Tetsu to help increase his abilities and was given time to meditate to increase his control over his beast mode. Bondo was given the task of excreting as much glue as he can. And finally, Izuku was put against Gran himself, as the man had some sort of obsession with hitting him and throwing him to the ground. The guy was too much for the boy, and his friends appreciated his sacrifice of fighting the man, but that didn't save them from the occasional kick to the back of the head if they faltered for a bit. Nothing saved them from that. The students walked inside the classroom after changing from their hero costumes with their teacher right on their tail. The man looked at them and felt sympathy, knowing what kind of hell they went through. The man then spoke, "All right maggots, I bet you had so much fun today. But remember, this was only today, you're going to train with Gran Torino till the sports festival." This was met by several groans of pain and annoyance, so the man yelled, "Suck it up, you big babies, do you know how many people wish to be in your place? Getting trained by the person who trained All Might himself." This was met by silence and the students lowering their heads in shame as Vlad carried on, "All right, that's much better. Now, remember to train hard, and do your best." He then carried his stuff and exited the room, allowing the children to go to the lunch break. Setsuna then allowed herself to collapse on the table as she said, "Another session like that, and my parents will be making funeral arrangements. I feel like my entire body is going to fall apart." She looked at Izuku and threw herself at him, saying, "Greenie, catch me, I want to sleep in your embrace." The boy, who was too tired to feel embarrassed, opened his arms. The girl's attempt at flirting with him was thwarted when a giant fist grabbed her with her owner, saying, "Ouch, that hurts like hell." She looked at the green-haired girl, and told her, "Stop it, Set. Can't you see that Midoriya is in enough pain already?" She gestured toward the other greenhead, who looked like he was about to pass out from the pain. She saw how Torino was training him, and she cringed because the old man seemed to have a fine time punting her friend every second. She scratched the back of her head with a pained expression. "Tell me about it." It seemed like the old man was a sadist who had fun torturing children. Kanoko, who was face down on her desk, then added, "I don't doubt that one bit after this training from hell. It was so painful. My entire body is aching from pain and his kicks." Tetsu then humbled over as he cracked his neck and back, saying, "Tell me about it. I think I never tasted the ground as much as I did today. It's like the old man has something against us." Finally, Izuku lifted his head as he said, "Well, we can't say it wasn't a unique experience." He then shuddered as pain traveled throughout his entire body, with Kendo saying, "Take it easy, Midoriya. He did a number on you. I mean, I never saw you kiss the ground so much, even during our training sessions." She then remembered All Might running away as she finally understood why he was afraid. I guess I now see why All Might was afraid of him." She giggled a little as she added, "But like Midoriya said, it was a unique experience." Kamakiri, who was passing by, responded to her, "Tell that to my body and my blades. I can't feel anything. Even my legs feel numb. Heck, even my forehead feels numb." The boy then went outside the classroom to catch lunch. The five shrugged as they got out of their seats, and went to the cafeteria to eat with their friends and restore their energy. However, as they were going out, they saw a huge crowd at the door of their sister class. Kendo looked at it and scratched her head as she said, "What do you think this is about?" She looked at her friends, who looked as confused as she was. Setsuna grabbed one of the mobs as she asked him, "Hi mob guy, what happening here in front of class 1A? Don't tell me they're hoisting a party, and forgot to invite us." The person who she grabbed blushed as he answered, "Well, most of the people here are trying to scout the competition here. They're seeing what the hype is about Class 1A. You know what I mean. The girl nodded as she let him go. She looked at her comrades and said, nothing important really, it's just the general studies students scoping competition for the sports festival. This made Kanoko worried since her older sister studied her and she heard that if one of the students in general studies performed well, he can replace a hero student place. The mushroom girl expressed her worries as she said, there's a tradition that if a general studies student performed well in the sports festival, they can replace a student from the hero course. She then clutched her skirt in fear as she said, what if that happened to me? Kendo then hugged her as she rubbed her back saying, no, that won't happen. Do you know why? The girl tilted her head as Itsuka carried on, it's because you proved that you belong to the hero course on several occasions, especially during the USJ, so don't doubt yourself, okay? The smaller girl smiled at the bigger one as she nodded her head. A loud voice was heard that caused Izuku to shiver, coming here to see what the future pros look like, huh? A voice, which belonged to a student whose purple hair seemed to defy the laws of physics, then said, tell me, are all hero students arrogant as you are, or are you just a special case? In any case, I can't say that I'm impressed if this is the heroic Class 1A that survived the villain attack in the USJ. All I can see here is a bunch of children looking for glory. The students of 1B felt disgusted by his words. It was as if the class asked to be attacked by villains. Another voice which Itsuka facepalmed to it said, look at that, it is the lowly midgets of general studies here to think that they can take our place. Well, it's going to be hard seeing how Class 1A is going to dominate the sports festival and leave you in the dust. This caused an uproar, but Kendo noticed that Tetsu was beginning to get agitated, so she grabbed him by the scruff of his shirt and said, don't give in to his words. I know this guy, he has some kind of inferiority complex. She then walked away with everyone following her lead, but Izuku swore he heard Bakugo yell at him. The teens walked a couple of steps away from the chaos, but suddenly a voice rang out, young Midoriya is here. And from behind a corner All Might appeared as he pointed at the boy who was astounded by his classmates. The boy responded quickly. He asked, All Might Sensei, is there a problem? The huge man shook his head, not at all young Midoriya, but I want you in my office, so we can talk about how to advance your quirk and the levels of energy that you can handle. Remember, you did ask me last week when we were in the infirmary if I had any tips given that both our quirks are enhancement types. The boy nodded his head as he understood that this was All Might's way of saying I have something to tell you, and it's important. He honestly half expected the man to ask him for lunch. Izuku replied, okay, I'll come. He looked at his friends, go ahead guys, I'll catch up. They then separated into two groups as someone said, All Might and Midoriya, huh? In All Might's office, the man deflated to his normal form as he began to speak, young Midoriya, I've brought here to my office to tell you a couple of things, one of them that my limit has gone down from 3.5 hours to just 2 hours due to the USJ. The boy began to panic, but All Might calmed him down saying, it's not your fault young Midoriya. This was going to happen sooner or later, and thanks to that Nomu thing it was sooner, but now onto a more pressing matter. The sports festival is around the corner. The boy nodded his head as he said, yeah, and I'm super excited about it. I always wanted to be a part of it, and my dream has finally arrived. The gaunt man smiled at his successor's enthusiasm, feeling bad for the bomb that he was about to drop moments later. Well, in any case, I'm happy that you're excited, but I want to tell you something that when you go out there 2 weeks later, I want you to tell the world that you're here. Make them feel as if they're looking at the new symbol of peace. The boy smiled and nodded his head. The man's smile then disappeared, worrying his successor, who asked, All Might, is everything okay? The man asked, young Midoriya, did I ever tell you the true story of One for All? The boy shook his head, remembering that All Might explained what One for All is, but never told him what the story behind it is. The man then passed him a cup of tea as he said, well, I'm about to tell you. The man looked at the window as if he was reliving some memory and began to tell the tale of One for All. You see, back during the emergence of quirks, there was civil chaos. Back then, people were afraid of everything that had to do with quirks. I can't blame them honestly. However, during that time, a man appeared. He could take and give quirks. This made Izuku's eyes widen. That man then began to work his way through society. He used to take quirks and give them, however, those given quirks would become mindless slaves to the man's will. He was unstoppable by all accounts. Izuku interrupted him saying, but if he was someone so strong, why don't we hear about him in the history books? All Might looked at him, because he made sure he was never mentioned. He was like the boogeyman of the underworld. Back to the story, the man had a quirkless brother. He was sickly and weak, but he had a great sense of justice and always opposed his brother. He was eventually thrown inside a vault to break his will, but it didn't work. However, one day the older brother decided to give the younger one a stockpile quirk. Was it out of sympathy or an attempt to brainwash him? No one knew. But turns out that the younger brother did have a quirk. It seemed a useless one. The ability to transfer quirks, but when those two powers met with each other, they combined and formed. Izuku trailed on saying, one for all. Yes, one for all was born from that. Ironic, isn't it, that the beacon of hope was born for the bowels of darkness itself? In any case, the man tried to face his brother, but he failed given the vast strength difference. However, he made sure that his power was passed on, so another can finish the job, and that was what continued to happen. One after another, the users of OFA faced off against this monster bravely only for me to end this cycle when I killed him. Izuku's eyes widened because he couldn't even imagine All Might capable of killing someone, or so I thought till recently. Izuku quirked an eyebrow as he asked the hero, what do you mean, All Might? The man looked at him, and answered, do you remember the monster that you and your friends faced at the USJ? The Nomu. The boy shivered, signifying that he indeed did remember the near-death encounter. Well, tests were made on it, and it turned out that the monster has multiple quirks in it. This made Izuku's blood run cold, so there is a chance that this monster might be still up and running. I think this was my fault since I never confirmed if the body was present after I squashed his head like a watermelon. Izuku was now sure that he could never look at a watermelon the same way ever again. I understand why you told me that, All Might, and I promised to increase my training. He was then cut by a punch. I didn't tell you because I wanted to increase your training. The man massaged his forehead before adding, geez kid, are planning on killing yourself before you become a pro hero. Training is good, I won't disagree with that, but there's a difference between training and killing yourself. You always need time for relaxation. This is why Gran Torino was brought in to help you guys train better. The man finished his speech and looked at the boy, who seemed ashamed, but he quickly said, I'm not mad at you, young Midoriya. I could never be mad at you. I'm just worried you might overwork yourself. The boy nodded his head saying, I promise I won't go overboard, All Might, but why did you tell me about All for One if it wasn't to increase my training? The man smiled at his successor saying, because it's something I should have told from the beginning and something that was your right to know. Young Midoriya, you have a courageous spirit, and I took advantage of that without knowing it. I gave you a quirk that had a bonus feature of having its own nemesis without telling you about that part. Although I thought he was dead at the time, that doesn't excuse me. I'd been a very bad mentor for you. From the beginning of the year, you've been progressing fast without any help from me. I feel ashamed that I left you to figure things out for yourself. The boy cut him off. No, you're the best, All Might. I mean, indeed, you didn't help me with some things, but it was for my own good. I mean, on the field you don't have people to tell you what to do, so I think it was for the best that I figured things out on my own. The blonde hero smiled at his successor and buffed, saying, thank you, young Midoriya, but I have something else to tell you. He then buffed down as he cleared his throat. I apologize for what I said that day on the roof, and for the weak apology that I gave on the street, young Midoriya. The boy was confused and asked, why do you say that, All Might? I don't get it. You already apologized. The hero shook his head as he said, no, sadly I didn't. What I did was only an attempt to clear my conscience without assessing the damages. The hero then remembered something Inu told them during his briefing about Midoriya. The dog hero explained that Midoriya sees himself through his quirk, which means if he ever lost it, he'll see himself as nothing more than a failure, and not fit to be a hero. He took a deep breath, and said, young Midoriya, that day you asked me if a quirkless person like you could be a hero. I told in response to that it is impossible to happen, while ignoring that other countries outside of Japan have quirkless heroes who are famous. For that, I want to amend my apology and make it clearer. You young Midoriya could become a hero, quirk or no quirk, because, at the end of the day, a good hero is a person who has a good heart. The hero chuckled, looking at his biggest fan who was crying, and hugged him as he said, "Come on young Midoriya, what did we say about the waterworks?" The hero student chuckled a little as he said, "I know All Might, but this is the first time someone believes in my dream about being a hero without a quirk." The hero rubbed his saying, "I know, but now you have to go to your friends and enjoy lunch." His successor stood up to leave, but All Might said, "And don't worry about AFO. We're dealing with him." The hero student smiled and said, "And if I have to fight him, I'll do it alongside you." The boy left the room as the older hero clutched his fist saying, "But you don't get it young Midoriya, there might be a day when you have to face him, and I might be long gone." He looked outside the window and buffed saying, "But till that dark day comes, I won't allow him to hurt you." After his talk with All Might, Izuku went to his friends in the cafeteria. He looked around for a bit from them, before Tetsu called out for him, "Yo, Midoriya, we're here. Come and eat before the break is over." The green-haired quickly ran to the table and sat down. His friends have ordered him his usual meal, which consisted of rice and his favorite meal, katsudon with an apple. The boy began to devour it hungrily, and the others were amazed at how fast he was making the food disappear from existence. The green-haired girl then said to her friend, "Oi Greenie, I get it that you're hungry, but if you keep stuffing your face like that, you're going to choke and die." She tried to disconnect her head to put it on his, but she was too tired to do that, so she only told him, "If you die, you'll be known as the guy who died by stuffing his face." The boy then lifted his head from his food and said, "Random information. There was a king who actually died from overeating." He then returned to stuffing his face, as his friend's sweat dropped at the random bit of information that he just dropped on them, as they mentally said, "Well, he seems to know about things that aren't hero-related." Tetsu then said, "I can't blame you for eating like that. I mean, the training was brutal. This food seems that it was blessed by the heavens and God himself." A loud shout from beside them said, "Do not mention the Lord's name in vain." This caused everyone present to sweat drop at the other cinnamon roll of Class 1B. Kendo apologized to her, "I'm sorry, Shoazaki. I promise we won't do it again. You have my word." The religious girl then smiled, and went back to her meal after she said a small prayer, "May the Lord bless your soul, Kendo." Her prayer was accompanied by a mysterious light that came out of nowhere, causing most of the students to wonder, where is this light coming from? Seriously, does she have a second quirk or something? Awase, who was sitting beside the girl, asked her, "Shoazaki, do you have an idea where the light that appears when you make a prayer comes from?" This made the religious girl tilt her head a little as she asked, "What light?" This caused the headband-wearing boy to drop to the ground as she chuckled at him. Kendo could only coo at her classmate's adorable behavior as she went back to her food, but she asked Izuku, "Hey Midoriya, what advice did All Might give you to strengthen your quirk and increase your capacity?" The boy hummed through his food as he said, "He gave me a small note that included a bunch of instructions for muscle growth so that my body can handle more power and percentages. He also told me that I should spar more since it helps increase my power levels." He shivered when he heard Kendo crack her knuckles saying, "Then I'll bring the hurt next time we train." Tetsu on the side said, "Kendo's so manly." The girl chuckled as she looked at Izuku, and asked him, "Can I have the note that All Might gave you?" The boy nodded his head since during his walk with the hero to his office, they both talked about ways Izuku can increase his power and power capacity. He reached for his pocket and pulled out the note, handing it over to Kendo, who unfolded it, and began to read it. The girl whistled as she said, "I have to say Midoriya, that's some intense workout regime that All Might cooked up for you." The others were intrigued as they looked over to have a look at the note, but Kanoko immediately began to feel tired on Izuku's behalf while Tetsu said, "This is a manly regime." He was whacked by Setsuna, who pointed to the cafeteria saying, "Calm down it. You just made us a spectacle that everyone's looking at." The boy apologized, but then said, "Are you excited about the sports festival like I am?" Itsuka gave Izuku the notes back, and said, "I have to say I'm really pumped. I mean, I have been watching ever since I was a small baby. I always dreamt about participating in it. I mean, each year they pull out something new, and it's really crazy." Izuku nodded his head to his friend's enthusiasm. She looked at him, and asked, "Say, can I use that workout regime too? The boy shook his head saying, I advise against it since it was tailored for my body, but if you want you can always ask All Might, I'm sure he'll be happy to help you. The girl nodded as she made a mental note to ask the blonde hero later if he can cook up for her a training regime. Kanoko then said, I'm excited too, though I'm still afraid about the whole getting switched thing, but I'm still excited. The girl was hugged by Kendo, who began to rub circles on her back and say, it won't happen. Setsuna began to groan as everyone looked at her as she said, all this talk about getting replaced, training, and the sports festival is really boring. How about we do something after the festival to relieve all the tension that we're feeling? Itsuka was shocked by her words and said, for once Set, use something that makes actual sense. The sharp-toothed girl didn't register this insult as she said, why, thank you. It was then that she actually registered it and yelled, hey. She was cut from her thought when two people approached their table. She looked and the class representative of 1A and the invisible girl. She quirked an eyebrow wondering what they want, but Kendo said, Yaoyorozu, what can I help with? The rich girl smiled as she asked, can I take a seat with my friend before I ask? Kendo nodded to her, so both girls took a seat, and they both introduced themselves, hey, my name is Momo Yaoyorozu, and this is my friend Toru Hagakure. She looked at Kendo and told her, back during the USJ, you told me something about a DNA-infused costume, but we never talked about it on the way back to UA. The orange-haired girl remembered when she told the rich girl about the DNA-infused costume and said, I don't know, but Tokage has one, so she might have an idea. The rich girl looked at the mentioned girl, remembering her from the recommendation exams. The lizard girl then said, hey Yaoyorozu, DNA-infused costumes are like regular ones, but the difference is that when you use your quirk, it acts like a part of it, but for it to work you have to give them some hair. You know it can't be a DNA costume without some DNA at the end of the day. The rich girl was intrigued as she said, thank you, I'll make sure that I give a visit to the support lab and place an order on it, and give them some of my hair and Hagakure's too, given that her suit is only gloves and boots. This made the five friends raise an eyebrow as Kendo said quietly, damn those perverts, even in the support lab there are a lot of them. Setsuna then said, you know, if you want someone to help sketch your new costume, Greenie would be happy to help you. Momo looked at Midoriya, who looked like he just wanted to die, and asked, are you sure? He seems that he wants to anywhere but here. Yeah, I'm totally sure. He's just really awful with social interactions. Setsuna said as clouds formed above Izuku's head and began to rain on him as he said, there's no need to be so brutal. The girl laughed as she hugged her friend from the side saying, I never said it's a bad thing. Toru on the side was giggling with happiness as she saw the scene. Izuku then looked at both girls, or at least one of them, given the other as invisible, saying, all right, I need to know your quirks so I can draw accurate sketches. Toru said, well, mine is invisibility. It's kinda self-explanatory. The boy shook his head and said, not really, if you're really invisible then you shouldn't be able to see since light will pass through you. I think your quirk is light refraction, and if trained can emit light beams that can cut through metal, and maybe you can become visible again. For suit, the boy was cut off when the invisible girl grabbed him, and said, I can become visible. How? The boy blushed and said, you need to train your quirk and control your refraction index. I really suggest after the festival you go to a light-based hero to help you control that aspect of your quirk. He was then hugged by the girl, who thanked him profusely. Momo then said, my quirk is creation. It allows me to create non-organic objects from the lipids in my body, but I need to know what those objects are made of for it to actually work. The boy began to write notes into his book as he said, can you make gases? Can you train yourself to make a complex object with a little number of lipids? He trailed off, unnerving the rich girl as Tokage smacked him saying, calm down Greenie, I know you like quirks, but you're unnerving her. The boy chuckled awkwardly as he said, sorry, I just really like quirks, but down to business. For your costume, I recommend a full-body suit from DNA with some areas having magnets on them to allow the creations to go out easily. Furthermore, you need to have an electronic bracelet which has a huge amount of materials in it with their formulas connected to a visor on your head so you don't need to raise your hand every time you need to use your quirk. Momo was shocked at the explanation, but said, thank you Midoriya. I'll make sure to tell the support lab your recommendations, and I assume Hagakure only needs a suit with all types of resistance. The boy nodded as he began sketching both suits and told the girls he will give them to Kendo, who give them to them later on. Toru then asked, "What were you guys talking about before we came here?" Setsuna answered her, "We were talking about having a vacation after the sports festival to relax. You know, after the whole dying thing." Momo then took a thinking pose as she put her hand on her chin, saying, "You know what? That may not be such a bad idea. I bet after the sports festival everyone will be tired and worn out. A little outing with friends will do wonders to help lift their spirits from the ground." The girl began to hum as if she was contemplating something, and asked, looking at both Midoriya and Kendo, "How about both our classes go together? This way we get to know each other better, and our classes could bond and mend any damages caused by the blonde hooligans." Momo said as she pointed at both Bakugo and Monoma. Izuku nodded his head, liking the idea. "That sounds like a good way to bond together." Itsuka also nodded her head as she said, "That is a wonderful idea, Yaoyorozu. I mean, this way we can let both classes see that they are not the enemy, while also bonding and finding common ground. This will really help us when we participate in any shared activities." Toru added, "Maybe after the beach outing, we can all have a sleepover at my house. That way the good times can continue." Everyone hummed a little, digesting the idea as Momo tilted her head and asked, "What's a sleepover party?" This made everyone's eyes go wide as they looked at Momo, and Toru said, "You're not joking, are you?" The girl shook her head, and everyone was shocked that Momo didn't know what a sleepover is. Setsuna asked her, "Before you came here, Yaoyorozu, where did you study?" The girl answered, "I'm actually homeschooled." This caused Toru to say in her head, "This explains everything." Kendo shook her head, saying, "We can't have that now, can we? A sleepover party is a party made between friends where they come to one of their friends' homes, have games, watch movies, eat food, and at the end sleep together in sleeping bags." The rich girl began to emit a happy aurora around as she said, "That's so exciting. Can we have one at my house?" The others shrugged as Itsuka said, "Sure, no problem. I bet it's going to be fun." Momo then said, "I have to tell my mother, so we can open the movie hall, bring top-class chefs, and perhaps import some meat for the beach outing. Now the sleepover party, what type of tea do you guys want? I have Harrods and Wedgwood in the house cause my family likes them a lot, but I personally prefer Golden Tips Imperial." Momo continued to carry on with her plans as the others looked at her dumbfounded. Everyone has a blissful expression on their face as they mentally said in one voice, "It's like she causally slapped us with the fact that she's richer than us, but I can't care because she's so happy and bouncy right now." Izuku then coughed as he said, "What was that first one? Harrods, I think." Momo replied to him excitedly, "Yes, I love that one very much." She was cut off by someone saying, My, Yaoyorozu, what are you doing with these inferior beings? You should be sitting with us, the superior class 1A, not these BU." He fell into a heap as a dart hit his neck, courtesy of a blow dart that Momo just made. Kendo nodded her head, saying, "Effective method of shutting him up. If you want, I can teach you how to neck chop him, so you won't waste your quirk on him anymore." The rich girl shook her head, saying, "No problem, I think it's for the best that I keep doing that. Maybe he'll be scared at one point, thinking I will put poison in it, and stop." They all heard the bell ring, which signified the end of the break. Momo then looked at Kendo and said, "I'll send the details over the phone for the beach and the sleepover." She grabbed Monoma's shirt and yanked him to their classroom as she waved over to them. Kendo said, "It sure reminds me of the good old days back in junior high." She looked at her classmates, and said, "Come on, guys, let's go back to homeroom. Sensei will have our heads for dinner." At the end of the day, Itsuka stood in front of the classroom and said, "Hey guys, I have an announcement to make. Myself and the class representative of Class 1A agreed that both of our classes have started on the wrong foot. So to mend things over, we decided that after the sports festival, we will have a beach day, and a sleepover at Yaoyorozu's house, 1A's rep, so please, if anyone is interested, please either inform me or Midoriya so we can tell the others about the number of people coming." The class nodded as multiple people like Shiozaki, Awase, Shishida, and even the silent Yui told her that they were interested, and wanted to go. Others told her that they need time, and wanted to think about it first or talk with their parents. Itsuka then went to her desk and began to pack her stuff. She looked at the clock, and said, "Midoriya, ready yourself because today I going to go hard on you that I'll make you wish that you were dead." The boy awkwardly chuckled at her excited behavior. Both reps then heard shuffling in front of the door of their homeroom and went to investigate what was happening there. They were shocked when they found a huge mob of students blocking the door, so Kendo decided to use her diplomacy. "Please, I must ask you to clear the way, because my friend and myself need to go to training." A boy, which everyone recognized was the purple-haired boy from earlier who went head-to-head with Bakugo, said, "Please, don't mind us by all means. We're just here to see if you have any positions that we might be able to take. You know what they say, in the sports festival if a student from general studies was able to impress the facility they might switch places with someone from the hero course." He then looked inside and said with glee, "Perfect 3 spots, the brown-haired girl seems to be afraid. The giant seems to be quivering, and finally the exchange student. I don't know why they put her here, she doesn't even know the language." Itsuka cut him off as she said, "Are you done rambling? There are people here who have better things to do with their time than listen to your mad talk." I thought that Class 1B would have more humility, but guess I was wrong. You know you guys think that you all are so amazing. I mean the entrance exam leans toward people with physical or combat quirks, so don't think because you passed it that you're special. Shut the fuck up, and open the way, weakling." The entire class looked at Kamakiri shocked at the rude way that he told the boy off. The boy didn't seem fazed by it though as he said, "You remind me of the blonde in 1A. Don't compare me to that scum of the earth, and don't compare us to you, if you're here cause you're talking about quirks." Kamakiri glanced at his classmates. "You told us that the entrance exam favors people with combat or physical quirk, but not everyone here has one. The brown-haired girl has a mushroom quirk yet she managed to pass. The brown-haired boy has an air-hardening quirk that only makes platforms yet he managed to pass. Come on and ask every one of us, and you'll see that all of us, even the girls, are in a better physical condition than your sorry ass. I bet you came to the entrance exam thinking all I need is my quirk. I bet you said that you don't need to train or anything, and once you saw the robots you forgot that you can be a hero by also saving people." He pointed at Izuku saying, "This guy over here only passed the entrance exam through rescue points. Tell me why didn't you?" The boy in question seemed to fume as he stumped away angrily at the verbal lecture he had. Itsuka looked at the boy, and said, "Wow Kamakiri, that's really great of you. I never thought you can say something so deep and meaningful. Honestly, I thought you hate all of us." The boy looked at her and shrugged as he said, "I just hate those who whine about not achieving their dreams and not actually putting in the effort. He came here thinking he can intimidate us with fancy words and crazy speeches. I just didn't take too kindly to that and gave him a dose of his own medicine. We all worked hard for our dreams, and they aren't going to be lost because of some guy who doesn't want to put an effort into his dream." Everyone looked at the boy's retreating form shocked at the speech he gave as the crowd began to slowly go away. They all began to remember their own hard work to enter the hero course. Itsuka grabbed Izuku and dragged him to the training room they usually use as she said, "You know Kamakiri's kinda right. You know when I met him first I thought he was kinda a jerk for the way he was treating you. Now, I honestly think that there was a reason, and he's actually trying to change." The boy nodded as he said, "I believe so, Kendo. I really hope I can become friends with him one day." The girl chuckled as she said, "Izuku Midoriya, the boy who wants to become friends with everyone who set his eyes on. It might be an impossible mission, but it's not too difficult for our protagonist through the power of friendship." The boy giggled at her saying, "I have to give you credit for this. This is the first time someone joked about that. I never really have friends before." The girl just said, "Well, you have us now." They then continued their way toward the gym. After arriving at the gym, they were greeted by an unwelcome surprise, or rather Izuku was greeted by one Gran Torino standing with Vlad waiting for him. The boy gulped as Gran Torino explained that since the boy only manifested his quirk he needs extra training with him, and the training from hell began as Gran Torino began bouncing from one place to another, and was kicking Izuku's ass at every corner. Izuku was currently on the ground as Torino came near him saying, "Tell me, Zygote, did you have all of your steam blown out already? Torino looked at his clock, and said, anyway, that's enough for today. Save your energy for tomorrow. Vlad was about to tell his student to go and wish, but the boy grabbed the old hero, and said, just one more time, Torino. The old man looked at him and rubbed his chin, smiling as he remembered when he was training All Might, so he said, all right, just one more time, and after that, you relax. The boy nodded as he readied himself. Izuku activated One for All at 6% and ran toward Gran, who activated his quirk and jumped away, avoiding him. The man turned in the air as he went in for a kick, but Izuku dodged him. The boy tried to catch him as he pushed his quirk to 7%, but the man kicked his hand away before kicking him to the side, but the boy landed on his feet. He looked at the man, who returned to the air and smiled as an idea entered his mind. The boy charged his quirk to 8% and jumped high in the air as he tried to reach Gran. Torino saw this and wondered why the boy did such a simple mistake, but he went for a kick anyway. As he was about to reach him, the boy pushed his quirk further in a burst of speed, shocking the old man. A burst of dust emerged after their attacks connected. When the smoke cleared, Izuku was on his back while Torino was rubbing a bruise on his cheek as he said to Izuku, well done kid, you managed to hit me. Thanks, Gran Torino, the boy said before entering the bathrooms. Vlad approached the old man with Kendo, who was watching. So what do you think about the progress with his work, Torino sensei? The old man replied, you're doing a fine job, Vlad. I'm shocked he's not breaking his bones though. It's a good thing he figured out how to regulate his quirk on the first day, or there was going to be a lot of broken bones in his future. Once Izuku finished his shower and got dressed, he and Kendo left the gym to go to their homes, or in Izuku's case to help Pony with her Japanese. At the front of the school, Pony stood there waiting patiently for Izuku. The girl heard footsteps coming her way and looked only to see Izuku giving his goodbyes to Kendo as he walked toward her. The boy said in English, hello Tsunotori, let's go to a cafe, so we can begin with your lessons. The girl bounced on her feet saying, thank you, Midoriya. That's really nice of you. No one else is free enough to help me, and you're taking the trouble to help me. Are you sure I'm not causing you any disturbance? The boy laughed saying, it's no problem, Tsunotori. It's a hero's job to help others, and even small actions such as these could be considered heroic. Plus, I don't want you to feel like that anymore. I'm the one who offered it, so feel free to take your time while we're studying. The girl nodded her head as she said, all right, Midoriya. Just one question though, how are you planning to teach me? I mean, I know the basics of the language, so that is how I was able to go by in Japan. The boy smiled saying, I think that we will work on translation. I mean, we'll read a book, and begin to translate it from the original to Japanese. They arrived at the cafe and Izuku asked the girl, is there any book you prefer to read, so it can make the process easier? The girl blushed saying, I like Harry Potter. She then looked away embarrassed as Izuku said, there's nothing to be ashamed of, Tsunotori. A lot of people like books from the pre-quirk era. The two entered the cafe and began to read the online book as Izuku helped Pony read it in Japanese after translating it from English. It continued for about 3 hours before they called it off. It's been 1 week since the students were introduced to the hell known as Gran Torino's training, and they have been making increases in their abilities. Right now, Izuku was currently sparring with Kendo as he ducked under her fist. The boy jumped in the air as he directed a kick at the girl. The girl grabbed him and threw him to the side, to which the boy landed on his feet with enough time to block the girl's fist, which threw him back. The boy quickly ran and tried to kick the girl in the chest, which she blocked by enlarging her hand, but the boy then punched her in the gut, before kicking her feet and pinning her to the ground. The girl back-headed him, breaking his hold before grabbing him, but the boy elbowed her, breaking free from her grasp. The boy then powered up his quirk to 8% and sidekicked the girl in her stomach, sending her to the ground. The boy then pinned her, making sure not to get close for a headbutt, and in 3 seconds, Vlad said, match over. Win for Midoriya. The boy stood up victoriously as he said, finally, I won against you, Kendo. The girl chuckled as she said, well, now it's 1 to 300. This caused the boy's sails to be emptied as he slumped to the ground, with the girl now trying to comfort him. Vlad then said, all right, you two, you've been working hard ever since we came here. Take some time to rest. The boy then walked away and looked to his side, seeing his classmate Reiko working on her quirk, though she seemed from her movements that she was frustrated. Although Izuku had never spoken to her before, he felt that he can't just leave her hanging. He approached her and asked, "Is there any problem, Yanagi?" The girl looked at him, and said, "Nothing too serious, Midoriya. It just seems that my endeavor to further the horizon of my quirk is blocked by unknown factors that are not in my hand, so it's been making the interior preposition of my psyche unsatisfied." The boy simply stared, but then Yui came beside him and translated what the girl said for him. She means that her work on her quirk isn't going anywhere, and she feels kinda down. The boy nodded his head, thanking her as the girl moved away from him. Izuku asked the girl, "Do you want help from me? I mean, I'm good with quirk analysis." The girl nodded, saying, "Thank you. My quirk is poltergeist, which allows me to lift things that are about the average height of a human." The boy looked at her, and asked, "Is there a reason your hands glow when you use your quirk?" The girl replied saying, "My quirk is connected to my hands. When my hands glow, it means my quirk is active." The boy bit his pen, saying, "I think that you should try weightlifting, cause if your quirk is connected with your hand, for you to increase the weight limit, you must increase the weight you can lift." He then asked, "Can you fly?" The girl shook her head as Izuku said, "Well, I think you could use some board to help you fly. Perhaps you can add something to help stay on the board, like straps." The girl's eyes widened as she said, "That's something I never thought, Midoriya. Thanks for the insight. Alright little kids, come here. I want to have a little test with you after all this training," the old hero said. Everyone then readied themselves, but 12 minutes later everyone was on the ground with one of Abara's vines holding a white flag as a sign of surrender and defeat. "I expected better, but your times are different than mine," the old hero said, before running his hand through his hair as he said, "Well, back to training you go." Everyone groaned but lifted themselves, and went back to their respective training. Another week went by, and now Izuku was standing in front of the door of his house as his mother told him, "Izuku, do your best out there." The boy smiled at her as he said, "I promise you that I'll do my best, Mom." To be continued. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Now we will see you in the next video.